across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
My thanks to the legend that is Mike Graham, of course, Mike Graham, the king of breakfast here on Talk. It's Mark Dolan in for Alex Phillips. We have got a big 3 hours to come. As concerned ordinary Brits take to the streets to protest against migrant hotels this weekend, will hard-left agitators use the opportunity to spark violence and chaos? And the Starmer wave continues with a record 111,000 asylum claims since Labour came to office. Could this crisis engulf Sagir's premiership as public anger grows? I'll be asking one of the most respected and experienced journalists in the country, none other than former political editor of the Sun newspaper, Trevor Kavanagh. Lucy Connolly walks free after an insane verdict that saw her behind bars for over 300 days. Her angry husband speaks out. Yes, her post was offensive, it was controversial, it was wrong, but are her remarks, however unpalatable, a test case for free speech and a test case that Britain has provably failed? And have lefty judges made this woman a martyr? Do you remember the good old days when you were allowed to be offensive and say outrageous things? This is the United Kingdom. We have, folks, forgotten who we are. The right to offend is an inalienable right, and I hope to offend plenty of people in the next 3 hours, especially the wokesters and the work shy and a few lefties. Now it's that time of year, folks. August bank holiday weekend upon us, which means mediocre weather. It's freezing outside. I came in on the moped. I've got like my gloves on. Feels like October. But the weather's not the biggest problem. Travel chaos beckons. Will help you navigate the carnage as you try to have a few days off at the seaside or in the Peak District or wherever you're going to go in our beautiful country. And we're going to connect with one of the biggest names in broadcasting who's currently on his way to Cornwall. Am I right? I'm right about this, Ted? Kevin O'Sullivan behind the wheel of a car. Is that even allowed? So we're going to be charting his journey. I mean, forget about Phileas Fogg and Christopher Columbus. Kevin O'Sullivan's on the road in the Tesla or the Merc. What's he driving these days? He makes too much money as far as I'm concerned. And this country is crying out for change. I think we all can agree on that. And whilst he is way ahead in the polls, is Nigel Farage really the man to deliver it? Or will it be yet more broken promises from an entertaining, charismatic politician? You know what I'm saying? Broken promises, entertaining, charismatic politician with wild hair. We've been there before, folks. Is there a danger that Nigel could disappoint? Can reform really deliver a Trump-style revolution, or is it more snake oil populism that has no substance beyond the headlines? I'll be asking a leading figure within the Reform UK project. And has Donald done the double? Could the wars in Gaza and Ukraine be done by Christmas? I'll be hearing from the top brave ex-serviceman who's just come back from the Ukraine. Does peace beckon? And is it all thanks to the bad orange man? And folks, Health Secretary Wes Streeting admits Labour has failed to convince the public of its project. No kidding. No sugar Sherlock. The public aren't convinced by Labour's plans. Plus, a quarter of Labour members are now set to back Jeremy Corbyn's new party. Is the left imploding? Can Labour turn this ship around? And will Starmer survive to fight the next election? I'll be asking a former top trade unionist. Plus, education standards. There's so much to get through. But we'll start with this. I hate to say, I told you so. Yes, the Conservatives were a disaster. COVID overreaction. Unchecked mass immigration, unchecked illegal immigration under a Conservative government, the worst excesses of net zero. It was a very, very patchy record, to be polite. But in the run-up to last July's election, it was abundantly clear that things would get only worse under Labour. Who thought in their right mind that a political party would tackle the strikes and union chaos whilst being bankrolled by the self-same unions? How were Labour, funded by the unions, going to tackle the strikes? It wasn't going to happen. Who thought Labour would combat hated political correctness in our public institutions, given that this is a party which is institutionally woke to its core, with a Prime Minister who takes the knee to the latest cause, who says anyone concerned about the impact on our society of mass immigration is far right, and who needs the Supreme Court to help him understand what a woman is? Were Labour going to be the answer for our welfare state, which is bloated, our inefficient public services, our spiralling welfare bill, when it's in the DNA of Labour to spend, spend, spend? That is what they exist to do, is to spend other people's money. Well, I know which people I'm talking about. It's your money. And now Rachel Reeves is after your pension. She's after your savings. She's gone after your employers, which will be passed on to you. And now she's after your house. She wants to take your house. There's no point buying property anymore because we are approaching communism 2.0. The principle that your private residence is an inalienable asset, free from taxation, is sacred. It is central to the very essence of our economy and our society. And Labour threaten to rob us of that as well. Now, the irony is, I feel a bit sorry for Sakir. Sir Keir Starmer. Mister, I don't know what a woman is. OK. I feel a bit sorry for Starmer, and I'll tell you for why. Because he did try to cut disability benefits, right? He's not a stupid man. He's a dishonest man, and he's incompetent with all the wrong ideas. But he's not stupid. And he's seen the bottom line. The country is broke. And so he tried to cut disability benefits. His party wouldn't let him. And he's about to, no doubt, do a U-turn on the two-child benefit cap. That's a debatable story, but it exists to protect the public finances. Labour likely to once again threaten our credibility on the international bond markets with another profligate policy that we cannot afford. Rachel Reeves, was she really going to grow the economy by taxing it to oblivion and burdening businesses with yet more red tape and a workers' rights package which is going to be terrible for workers and terrible for employers? Did we think that Labour would fix mass immigration and illegal boat crossings when deep down they want open borders? They don't believe in controlling the borders of this country because they have pathological empathy. So I'm afraid this relatively new government, just over a year in charge, is a horrible dumpster fire. Growth down, investment down, consumer confidence down, business confidence down. Meanwhile, energy prices up, inflation up, welfare claimants up by 1 million in a year, unemployment up. Those of us old enough to remember know exactly where this is going. Socialism, the failed idea that never dies, and here we go again in this hellish merry-go-round. Now, the famously principle-free Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he could actually do a hard pivot to a set of policies that would be great for the country. And if he did so, let me tell you here on Talk, on the national television, airwaves and the radio, that I would back him all the way. If Starmer changes tack, he's got my vote. All he's got to do is cut public spending because we live beyond our means, cut waste, cut bureaucracy, scrap net zero, face down the unions, drill baby drill, we have decades worth of oil and gas in the North Sea, close the border, drag legal net migration down to 50k a year tops. There you go, 50k tops and no more. See, other people say, oh, you can't really put a number on it. You can't really say a number. Yes, I'm going to give you a number, 50k. Some would say zero. I'll let you have 50k a year and zero illegal immigration. Can we work with that? And you should cut taxes to grow the economy. If he did that, he's got my vote, but it ain't going to happen because even if he chose to do so, as we saw with the benefit cut plans, the party won't back him. The MPs behind him are divided, they're a rabble, they're undisciplined and out of control. And here's a final thought, just to think about this, folks. We've got 4 more years of this. A political revolution is coming at the next election. But will there still be a country left to govern? Your number, my number, 0344 499 1000. This show's all about you, and it's about your opinions and your calls. So book your place on the show, 0344 499 1000. And let's get the views now of one of the most respected journalists in the country, and what a thrill to be reunited with the former political editor of The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. Trevor, what a delight to have you on the programme and to see you again. I'm not one to gloat, I'm not one to wag my finger, but I read your columns in the run-up to the last election. Unfortunately, we knew this would happen. It's been all too predictable. Arguably, things are worse than you might have even feared, Trevor.
They are indeed. And I think we both forecast that this would happen, but it's in fact worse than even the worst we predicted. And sadly, I have to tell you, it's not going to get any better. I think that some of the questions you raised during your preamble here on what's going to happen next is that we're going to see a lot more of the sort of things that enraged the British public who mistakenly voted for a Labour government after 14 years of Conservative chaos. And I think that one of the things you also mentioned was, will reform under Nigel Farage be able to put it back together? Well, whatever happens, I think the election of reform is now set in stone, simply because as the mood of the public was in July of last year, they are going to be absolutely fed up to the back teeth with Labour. I fear that they're not going to go towards the Tories. And I think that the momentum of reform is now unstoppable. And when you get to the situation where Labour is commanding the respect of just 1 in 8, 13% of the voting public, then I think they are dead men walking.
Are you surprised that Sir Keir Starmer has not pivoted at this stage? Because this is not a guy who historically, Trevor, has stuck to his principles.
Well, he doesn't have any principles. And as for pivoting, which way is he going to pivot? His natural inclination is to be as left-wing as the woke Labour government, the trade unions. I mean, woke isn't really any longer a strong enough term for the way that the left of centre regards Britain today. They detest the way of life which was normal, the British way of life which was normal until very, very recently, and especially July the 4th last year. They want to end it. They want to see the back of normal, common decency among between people who are elected and people who elect them. And I think that the disintegration of law and order, not just major crime, which is on the rise, I believe, anyway, despite the figures suggesting otherwise. You only have to walk the streets of London to see evidence of it.
Yeah.
I think that it's not just that. It is the disintegration of norms which were polite society, the ability of people to get along together instead of actually being aggressive to one another in public. Those are lines which are going to be very difficult to redefine and reintroduce under any government, whether it's Reform, the Tories, but certainly not Labour.
Are we being a little unfair on the Prime Minister, though, looking at it from the other point of view, Trevor? The migrant crisis inherited, the illegal migrant crossings in the Channel, unchecked legal mass migration, a tanking economy, the deficit, the woke takeover of our public institutions, the cost of net zero. This is all gifted to this new government by the Conservatives.
Well, all of that is true. but I don't think we're being unfair to Keir Starmer and his Labour government. You said earlier that he was a liar, which he is, and demonstrably and provably, but you said he wasn't stupid. Well, despite the fact that he's a KC with a good law degree, you can also be stupid. You can be stupid as well as clever, and you can be clever in the wrong way. And I think that, in fact, he's not even proving to be clever as a prime minister and a leader of this country. I think that in so many provable and demonstrable ways, Keir Starmer is leading us off a cliff edge. And I think, and I fear, that it may be irreparable, whoever wins power and by whatever majority they win it.
Do you see Starmer surviving to fight the next election, Trevor?
The tradition of the Labour Party is never to get rid of its leader, no matter what sort of dire circumstances they lead them into. And Neil Kinnock remained leader right through the catastrophic 80s and into the beginning of the 90s. And I think that no matter what they do, I mean, even Jeremy Corbyn remained leader until the election crashed him. He had to go then. But while they're in office, I think it's very difficult to get rid of them. And I suspect that he will limp on as he realizes that indeed Angela Rayner, who is surely the front runner for any succession, would be even worse.
It's a very, very good point. And I think Labour most definitely in the absence of Starmer would doubtless shift left. That is inevitable. Trevor, the country's in a febrile position at the moment. Can you think back to a time in your political reporting when we've been this divided, this anxious, this angry?
Yes, I can. When I think the 1970s, the winter of discontent, all of those historic periods were dangerous and angry and sulphurous. But there was always someone on the sidelines waiting to come in and do the job properly. There was a sort of system by which you had the Labour government in power under Wilson and Callaghan or previous prime ministers, and the pendulum would swing after they'd put the country into economic hardship back to the Conservatives, who would restabilize it. But that system has now disappeared, and it isn't automatic to assume that someone will come riding to the rescue at the next election, despite the fact that Nigel Farage has this huge apparent majority of voters at the moment. He's very inexperienced, if not totally inexperienced, in running a country. He's learning on the job in the local authorities, where I hope he's going to do a good job and prove that he can actually run a country and establish a cabinet which will deal sensibly with the problems of this country, which, while enormous, would not be incurable if you had a government with some sort of authority to deliver its mandate.
Trevor, we know about the anger around migrant hotels. They are a blight on communities. It's the loss of a focal point in a town or city. And people are likely going to be protesting this weekend. Is there a danger that hard left activists will seek to disrupt and probably to a degree dilute the narrative and cast everyone as far right?
That's been the policy so far for the last several years, not just under this particular government. The left is, and Labour particularly, has always regarded anyone on the right and centre as Tory scum. So that sort of language and that sort of incitement, in my view, to violence is inevitably going to lead to sort of problems we have talked about there. The thing is that High Court ruling on the hotels and asylum seekers in hotels has, I think, for the first time, given the ordinary silent majority, non-partisan members of the community a voice, a focus, something which has not been there before. They've been individual. They haven't been a group. They haven't been coordinated, and yet this has, for the first time, given them something to unite around. People who have never met one another will actually turn out around these hostels and protest against it. And I think that this is something that the Labour government is going to be very, very alarmed by, because this is a legitimate uprising by that silent majority.
Meanwhile, the unions continue to flex their muscles, and as I mentioned in my earlier preamble, Trevor, very difficult for Labour to stand up to the unions given that they're bankrolled by them and represent their political constituency. So my question to you is, Rachel Reeves, under pressure probably to settle some of these wage demands, she can't be long for this world politically, can she?
The same thing applies to Rachel Reeves as it does to Keir Starmer. They are clinging to one another like straws for a drowning man. The point is they might as well pay these pay demands now, because they will eventually, and it will save all the strife that we're going to go through on the tubes and with the doctors and nurses. The unions are in control of the Labour Party. Not only are they in control of the Labour Party, most of the Labour Party MPs sympathise with the unions. They believe that they're hard done by, despite the fact that between them, public sector workers are paid an enormous £240 billion a year. That's on the latest figures, which I think are probably overtaken already. They also draw huge pensions, and the pension liability that this country, the taxpayers of this country, face over the future decades is an unbelievable close to £3 trillion, which will have to be paid one way or the other as those pensions fall due. We are feather bedding the millions of workers who probably wouldn't get a job outside the public sector and yet are feather bedded by the taxpayer.
Trevor, I've been watching and you on the media for many years, reading your columns for decades. Fantastic to see you again, and thank you for joining us on Talk. My thanks to the former political editor of The Sun newspaper, one of the most not just respected journalists in the country, but influential as well. And that is the headline from Trevor Kavanagh, is that a reform victory in 4 years' time is now, and I quote, set in stone. OK, the political Nostradamus that is Trevor Kavanagh has predicted that Nigel Farage will be our next Prime Minister. And I'll take your calls on that next. 0344 499 1000. It's Mark Dolan on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Alex Phillips, and the messages are coming in thick and fast. The calls are stacking up as well. Good morning to Ange in Gloucestershire, who is watching and listening to the show, which is a marvellous thing, because don't forget, we're in-app, we're on YouTube, we're online, we're on the radio, we are everywhere. And this from Kaz in Bedford. Hi Mark, I knew this government was going to be a catastrophe when the first thing Starmer did was to jettison the Rwanda project. It was a pure act of vindictive petulance. This revealed his true character, which he'd kept under wraps during the election period. Why would you not at least give Rwanda a try after all the hard work and taxpayers' money that's been spent to set it up? This migrant crisis is karma for Starmer. What a great line. Kaz, can I have that? Because I spend hours trying to come up with pithy remarks to keep you folks entertained. And I think karma for Starmer is absolutely, that is a bravo. And I will say, you're so right, Kaz, here's the biggest problem with Starmer. He announced before the election that he'd scrap Rwanda, and I quote, even if it works. Is he the first Prime Minister in history to get rid of a policy, even if it works? I mean, it is quite self-destructive, and we're paying the price. Amanda says, Lucy Connolly, a political prisoner and a people's heroine of our time. Ian in Blockswich said, Mark, Churchill once said, trying to tax yourself to prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to pull himself up by the handle. I mean, what a poet that man was. No doubt Carl in Liverpool is a poet too. Good morning, Carl.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm very, very well. And there you heard it from one of the most respected journalists in the country, Carl, Trevor Kavanagh, saying it is now set in stone that Reform will win the next election. Your reaction?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we've all kind of come round to that way of thinking now. Anyway, I certainly have. Because, you know, if you go right back to the very start of Labour's tenure, it was shrouded in all sorts of controversy from the word go with the Rwanda plan, Keir Starmer's suits and whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, I said to your producer before, this government is the gift that keeps giving, and not in a good way. We're the working class people. I'm self-employed and a veteran. We're the ones that are on the front line, seeing everything and stressing about our bills and money and everything else, whereas the Prime Minister himself, he can't connect with the country. You know, we've had a long line of unbelievable things that he's done and said, and everything that comes out of his mouth, Mark, is a lie. So, yeah, Reform will definitely, I think they'll absolutely wipe the floor with both parties, Tories and Labour.
I mean, at the moment, they're penciled in. The latest polling, Carl, suggests that they'll have a majority of over 20, maybe 21, with the Tories, by the way, on 30, which is, you know, Armageddon time, with Labour just over 100. How much could Reform support grow? Because I don't think you can have a political revolution with a majority of 20. Do you think that could actually become, you know, could that become a landslide in time?
I think, well, we've got 4 years, Mark, haven't we? Really, a lot can happen, and then we've seen what's happened in a year under Labour. And what I will add to that is that I know from speaking to friends, more and more people are turning around and obviously coming over to Reform. But we need the politicians to jump ship. I heard on the radio earlier on that quite a lot of Labour members are jumping ship to Jeremy Corbyn's party.
Yes.
I mean, God knows what that man would do if he ever got in.
Yeah.
You know, he scares me. He scares me just as much as Ed Miliband.
Well, I totally agree with you. And don't forget that Sir Keir Starmer, our current Prime Minister, Carl, campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn to be the leader of this country.
He did, yeah. He did. Well, he's a Corbynite, and he is, deep down he is. And, you know, do you know what, Mark? Do you know what worries me more than anything? I've got children. I've got 3 young boys. And 4 years from now, my eldest will be 18, ready to go into the big bad world, and if he's at university or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't even let my children play out in the streets. I said to Ian in the week earlier, I don't even go into the city centre. anymore, because a lot of people don't from their own areas. The country has dramatically changed in such a short time of a year that they've been in. Now, the Tories have 14 years. We know what they did. But before then, it was Labour. It's like they purposely don't want to do it. They haven't got the political sense to go, we can sort this and we can come out this. Because who in their right mind, Mark, doesn't go into a job and want to do their best?
Indeed. I mean, they seem to be on a collision course, making all the wrong judgments. Carl, I am surprised that Keir Starmer, who, is an experienced guy from the world of law and now in politics, that he's not looking at the tea leaves and thinking, I need to change tack here, but it seems that that's not going to happen. Carl, what a brilliant call. Do ring in again soon. I'd love to pick up that conversation. Andrew is in leafy Hertfordshire. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Mark.
How is your August sunshine going on in Hertfordshire today?
Well, it's always blighty because we've got a Labour government, but we're lucky. we've got our health, so we're very fortunate. So
that's good.
In relation to first of all, Lucy Connolly, the big scandal there will be the Attorney General, what they said to the judge in the sentencing, and that should come out soon.
Yeah.
The judge was guided by the Attorney General, who told him to send her down for that time. Yeah. In relation to reform, they will not be the government in 4 years' time. There's no way. They will be the government next year, because Starmer is not going to last.
Well, I think Starmer's in trouble, I agree with you, within his own party, but it's very possible there could be some kind of coup and Wes Streeting comes in or Angela Rayner, but with that majority, you know as well as I do, Andrew, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, but you've got to look at history. If you don't look at history, then you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
We have a history of rioting in this country. It's wrong, I accept it. If you look at it now, we've got the Notting Hill Carnival in London, 7,000 policemen are going to be there. Yeah. That means they can't be outside hotels. One incident by one illegal migrant, the country is on a tinderbox. And Labour could not deal with that. They have to support the police, and the police are so run through that there is the opportunity for the police to deploy baton rounds and fire them on mainland Britain. Could you imagine what that would do to the Labour Party?
It would be devastating. And the other elephant in the room, Andrew, is the looming threat of a complete economic meltdown. That's no exaggeration. But there are plenty of people, including Andrew Sentence, a former advisor, Andrew, on the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, who thinks that we could be 6 months to a year away from a market meltdown. Andrew says that there'll be an election in a year's time. We can but dream. Thank you, Andrew. 0344 499 1000. Lots more to come. You are listening to Mark Dolan in for the fabulous Alex Phillips. And next up, we're going to talk about Lucy Connolly. Have the left turned her into a martyr? That's next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Mark Dolan on Talk. It's great to have your company. Let me say, it's great to be back at the home of common sense. And all I'll say to you is thank you for having me. Right, let's get to our next story now. Lucy Connolly, who posted a tweet during the Southport riots and was accused of inciting hatred and violence, was freed from jail to rejoin her husband and 12-year-old daughter yesterday after more than a year. As a very clear, in my view, victim of two-tier justice, her husband Ray, a Conservative on Northampton Town Council, said she'd cope relatively well with jail, adding the only person who hasn't is our daughter, which I think makes her conviction and her jail term all the more egregious. Over the past 10 years, a total of 141 people have been convicted of publishing material intending to stir up racial hatred, contrary to Section 19 of the Public Order Act 1986. Now, that's all well and good, that's well-intentioned. But this woman was banged up for an ill-advised tweet that she deleted and apologised for. So we are, I think, entering the point of no return when it comes to free speech or a lack thereof. Let's get the views of Laurie Wastall, who is the Associate Editor of the excellent narrative-challenging news website, The Daily Skeptic. Hi, Laurie.
Hi, Mark. Good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. The fallout from this conviction and then latterly release of Lucy Connolly continues apace, doesn't it?
It does indeed, and or as you mentioned, two-tier justice is, I think, the narrative that's really come out of this and that's really beginning to stick in the public mind. And your caller actually earlier mentioned the link here with the Attorney General, Lord Hermer. I think that's something that has really stuck in the craw. Which was that, of course, it was this very, very serious sentence that she was charged with, or a crime that she was charged with, stirring up racial hatred for this single tweet. That's actually been quite unusual. That offence was created all the way back in 1986 and was not, so before the internet, was not really designed to be used to go after just random tweets that people are just firing off and then deleting, perhaps. Yeah. And yet, she was charged with this offence, which could have landed her up to 7 years in prison. And when this offence was drafted, there was actually a free speech provision written into it, which is that in order that it's not used egregiously and to go after cases that it shouldn't, the Attorney General has to sign off on it. And Lord Hermer did indeed do that. And what he did by that was demonstrate that he thinks it was in the public interest for this mother and childminder, this non-violent criminal, to potentially face years and years in prison over a tweet.
Now, I just wonder where we draw the line in terms of free speech, Laurie, because I suspect that if you went on X or on Facebook and said, let's all meet tomorrow at 37 Acacia Avenue, let's get a group together and let's go and kill some ... certain group in society, right? If it was literally an instruction, we're gathering at this point and what we're going to do is we're going to do ourselves some murder. That I suspect, even for a free speech absolutist, may well catch the eye of the authorities and ought to be prosecuted. But beyond that, oughtn't we be able to write things on the internet that are offensive, outrageous, wrong, immoral, upsetting?
Well, absolutely. And this really draws the distinction between understanding of free speech that they have in America and what we have here with laws like the Public Order Act and stirring up racial hatred, which is that, as you say, in that example you gave, that would be a very explicit and clear incitement to violence in a particular place that might, if it did go on to happen, then there would be a clear link there between the speech and the violence. Whereas in Lucy's case, it was not actually stirring up violence directly, but it's stirring up so-called hatred. So she didn't mention any particular hotels. The tweet was not even, well, it was about various things. It was basically, she described it as her raging. And so it's, she's apologized for the tweet and said it was distasteful and all of this. But in America, it would never be seen as clear incitement to actual imminent lawless action. That's the test they would have. Also, we should have that distinction here too.
Yeah, Laurie, I mean, I'm no lawyer. Okay, but I mean, like my viewers and listeners, I've got a modicum of common sense, and the tweet was inflammatory. It was pretty offensive from the point of view of some people, but it was actually quite figurative. It wasn't a call to action. The reference to burning down hotels was if you want to, for all I care. So I don't even think that the language of the Post passes muster as something that is, worthy of police attention, actually.
No, and I agree. And I think this is part of the problem with that stirring up racial hatred offence, is that actually really what it allows the government to do is to go after not the actual inciting element of it, but the content, but in terms of her political opinions and what they really, as actually came out in the sentencing remarks and at the Court of Appeal, when she appealed against the sentence for being harsh, is that really the judicial system and the judges who oversaw her case that took exception to the other things she had said, and the fact that essentially they saw her as a racist person. And so these were not legal disputes with what she had done, but rather taking political exception to her views. And that's why people think it's very, very unfair.
Where's this going, do you think, Laurie, in terms of people being prosecuted for hurty tweets?
Well, it certainly seems to be increasing. So we saw, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, this offence has been on the books for a long time, but only recently has it started to be used aggressively to police things on the internet. So there were 44 people convicted for this offence last year, and that's a massive increase on previous years. A lot of those were in connection to Southport, and indeed some of those, as well as Lizzie Connolly, they haven't got quite as much traction, but some of those have been quite egregious ones as well. I mean, there was a man by the name of Dason Williams, for instance, a veteran who had posted basically AI images of soldiers and other things like this, and he was also done with stirring up racial hatred. He got about 2 years, and I think people are increasingly worried that these laws, which may have been on the books for a while, but are now being used to target people over their political opinions.
Laurie, a delight to have you on the show. Thanks for making the time. Laurie Wastel is the associate editor of the Daily Skeptic, which is a brilliant news website. I can recommend it. They challenge narratives. They are literally skeptical, which you've got to be. Given the garbage that you're fed by establishment media, then we need talk. We need the Daily Skeptic and one or two other outlets in order to just get to the truth. Because you can't trust what you hear on the BBC and woke ITV. Good luck with that. Listen, folks, I've got lots and lots of texts to get through. And after this, it is the bank holiday weekend. Are you on the beers already? Let me know. Give me a call. Tell me your plans for the bank holiday weekend. What are you up to this weekend? Will you be working or will you be enjoying a bit of a rest, a well-deserved break? I'll tell you who's having a well-deserved break. And it is none other than Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan, who I think you'll agree is a central pillar of this great organisation. He is one of the kingmakers of talk as a broadcasting outlet, and he's on holiday and he's on his way to Cornwall. He's behind the wheels of I believe it's a Lambo, which is very hard for him to get in and out of, let me tell you. I'm not sure what he's driving, we'll find out, but Kevin O'Sullivan's on his way to Cornwall and we're going to connect with him, and also we're going to have a look at potential travel chaos with a top travel expert. All of that is next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you, John, for your lovely message. John says, John's in Bedfordshire. Mark Dolan, welcome back. The cheeky chappy. That's lovely. Well, look, it's a thrill to be back, John. Thank you for having me and all of the viewers and listeners at Talk. Rob in Burnley, good to have you back, Mark. Oh, that's very kind. We enjoyed the opening ramble, okay, because I hate to say I told you so. The Tories were terrible, but we knew Labour would be worse, and here we are. Rob says, the only solace I can take from this disastrous administration is that the lifetime Labour voting working class will finally be done with them. OK, I'll get to more of your messages in just a moment. But first, it is August and yes, the weather is all right. There's a few clouds in the sky. It's not raining at least, but it's a bank holiday weekend. And as usual, travel chaos beckons. Let's get the unvarnished truth from the legendary Simon Calder, travel correspondent at The Independent. Hello, Simon.
Hello from London, King's Cross. My goodness, it's busy in here. Just to give you some example, the ladies has a queue about 50 women long just to go to the loo. So if you are going by train, try and spend a penny before you get to the station. Maybe lots and lots of people are travelling from King's Cross today because there is going to be disruption over the weekend. We will see here no trains running at all to Peterborough, which is about 75 miles north of here. There will be those famous rail replacement buses going from St Pancras station just across the road. And on top of that, we're also going to have complete shutdown tomorrow of cross-country trains. That's going to affect everybody who's going to be using that network, which connects Aberdeen with Plymouth, Manchester with Bournemouth, all through Birmingham New Street, and there will not be any cross-country trains tomorrow, I'm afraid.
Why do we always have travel chaos during bank holiday weekends, or why does it always seem that way, Simon?
Well, look, the RMT union chose the bank holiday weekend to absolutely make their point and cause as much disruption, of course, to people travelling to and from family holidays. But actually, it does make sense to have maybe here on the Sunday engineering works rather than all of the other days it could be. That's because during the working week, an awful lot of people have to travel. Over bank holidays, they've got a little bit of discretion about it. And furthermore, there are fewer people travelling typically on the Sunday in the middle of the bank holiday. It's something the rail companies have always done. The one change that we are seeing is that gradually train companies or Network Rail, who are doing all the engineering works, they're basically saying, right, maybe we should close whole sections for a week, a fortnight, a month, get all the work done rather than having these repeated closures, because they're so infuriating for people. And of course, people absolutely loathe those rail replacement buses.
They really, really do. A very brief word on the London Underground. I mean, you know, a vast number of our viewers and listeners outside London couldn't give two figs, but this is actually almost a national story, isn't it? The possibility that the London Underground network could close down for possibly almost a week as a result of strike chaos, likely costing the economy, Simon Calder, billions.
Oh, sure, yes, but this is the RMT again. They are pressing their case with the Mayor of London, who is responsible for the tube. He's saying, OK, or they're saying, we want more money and we want a reduced working week from 35 hours. They want to work less than that. They're concerned about fatigue on the, for staff working there. So there's a kind of warm-up strike on Friday the 5th and Saturday the 6th of September. Really gets going for 5 days on the 7th of September, coinciding with the last two nights of Coldplay at Wembley Stadium. Poor fans of that band have, I think, suffered enough. And it's, yeah, exactly, trying to close down the capital. couple of pieces of good news. The Elizabeth line, which runs east-west through the capital, will be running normally, as will the London Overground. But if you're thinking, oh, I'm in East London, I'll get the Docklands Light Railway, I'm afraid that is going to be shut down from the 7th to the 11th of September as well. Good luck, everybody.
Wow, not a Coldplay fan. That is Simon Calder off Chris Martin's Christmas card list. He's not even going to point a kiss cam at you, Simon. My thanks to the legendary Simon Calder, travel correspondent at The Independent, who is live from King's Cross Station. A political revolution is coming, but in 4 years' time, will there still be a country to govern? Ben is in Bristol. Good morning, Ben.
Hi, Mark. Talking to you takes me back to the dark days of COVID when we used to talk in the afternoons.
Oh, my goodness. Well, it's good to speak to you again.
Mark, I think I speak for a few listeners here. Welcome home.
Oh, that's
welcome
incredibly
home. We welcome
kind.
you home like a prodigal son. Maybe you had it made on that show and you shouldn't have left. Maybe it's good you come back. Well, I won't say any more about it.
Well, that's very sweet of you, and I appreciate it.
Political revolution is in the air. I mean, Trevor Kavanagh, a very insightful man, but he seemed a bit tepid about Farage as Prime Minister. No. Farage isn't a perfect man, but this is the Winston Churchill Mark II that we need in the UK right now. You know how Churchill came in that kind of political vacuum around the Second World War when Chamberlain just wasn't getting it. He wasn't dealing with the problems. And they called for Churchill, even though they'd been controversial up until then. And the country now, they're 15 points ahead in the polls. You will win an election on that.
Yeah.
The media and the political classes haven't caught up with this. The people are so disenchanted with the two-party systems. Kemi Badenoch, by the way, is 10 times cleverer and better leader than Nigel Farage, but she's far too sold to the system. She can't let go of things like the ECHR, and they can't let go of the apron strings of the political system. Farage is outside of this system to a significant degree. Look at what happens when he speaks in Parliament. They all go nuts. They're like baboons in the zoo. They start shouting him down and going crazy. The devils and the demons rise because he's being raised up, I believe, by God, to lead this nation in this critical time and to get us out of this fix, this mess, this craziness. We've got the problems, net zero. We've got the problem, political correctness. We've got the problems of all the madness of COVID, the overreach, and being sold to these globalist bodies. You know, the WEF and these crazy things that ruin in our country. And it's gradually dawning on people, even those stubborn Tory voters in the Shires who just still vote Tory, that the country is going downhill fast. And we need a significant course correction. And that Farage is that Churchill figure. You know, in the Second World War, they called for Churchill. They said, come and sort this out because we can't sort this out. He's got clever people around him, people like Richard Tice, people like that. And these other people, these business people that get involved, they're clever people. They're not bozos like that have the Labour cabinet and Tory. They just put anybody in charge of business or the environment. They don't know what energy. They don't know what they're talking about. And they need to get a grip on this energy crisis and get these bills in the UK are the highest in the world. Is that right? It's outrageous. The bills should be halved from what they are. You can't get an economy moving and get the bills down, the energy down. You can't do anything because everything's overstretched. So you're going to cut the bills, and he's going to cut the wokeness, he's cut the silliness. And there are some areas I feel he's a bit too wishy-washy, maybe some threats he's not seeing clearly. But he's better than these two bozos now. So put that Winston Churchill. You're back where you need to be, and he is about to go where he needs to be. And your caller is incredible, he said within a year, but I think within 2 years, 3 years, we can't go on like this, can we? There's going to be a general election.
Well, absolutely. If Nigel, I mean, we just have to hope that it's not another charismatic, entertaining politician that lets us down. I'm thinking of Boris, who, was responsible for the collapse of the Red Wall and get Brexit done. And we saw how that played out. So we absolutely have to make sure that Farage is not going to be Boris Mark II. Are you confident he won't be?
No, I don't think. He's not sold. Boris was sold to the system. Boris in COVID, he's like Kemi. He couldn't snip the apron strings of the system when it counted. He went along. That second lockdown killed him. He should never have done that second lockdown. He had a chance. He had a grace period after that first lockdown to get it right. But he was sold to the system. He did that speech, Boris. Remember he did that speech? He said, forgive me. Forgive me. He knew he'd let the people down. Kemi voted for all those measures, by the way. At least Farage, after a while, woke up and opposed the stuff which went on in COVID. No, Farage is a different beast. He stumbled out of that plane crash. He's known what it is to be attacked by the system, so he doesn't have the same loyalty to it. Boris and Kemi and people like that, they're sold to the system. They feathered their nest and they rose up by selling out to the system, by doing what they're told when it counts, doing what Boris, he said recently, Cummings said that Boris said we've got to keep the media happy. The press conferences with Farage are pure gold. because he doesn't take any messing off them when they ask those stupid questions. He's not moved by political correctness and all that sort of stuff. And I think there are some areas Farage could afford to be a bit more hard line. But, I mean, let's face it, anything's better than these bozos in at the moment, this paralysis we live in, this idiotic parliament we dwell in. I mean, this madness of it all. They're bought and sold to the system, a lot of them.
Briefly, Ben, though, very interesting, you said that you think Kemi might be brighter than Nigel. Does he have the pedigree and the intellect to deliver the change we need?
Of course he does. Look, he's a clever bloke. You don't get 15 points ahead in the poll by being thick as two planks. Farage is one of the cleverest politicians of the modern age. He's the architect behind Brexit. He's nobody's fool. He's run businesses and stuff like that. Kemi, I'm saying, she's very bright. She's got great. She should have been the Mrs. Thatcher for the country now, but she's blown it.
I think you're right. I think in the end she was Mrs. May, wasn't she? Ben, thank you for your kind words. It is great to be back, and what a brilliant call. Do stay in touch with us and get your calls in for the next hour, 0344 499 1000. We're going to stay on Farage and reform. The country needs change, but is Nigel just Boris 2.0, or can he be Britain's Trump? We'll debate that with a leading reform figure next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk at the home of common sense. Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Alex Phillips. We've got a very big 2 hours to come. Britain's kids are failing English and maths at record levels, and now the government are planning to scrap obligatory resits, essentially giving up on British kids. and sparking fears that academic standards will plunge further. Is it time to bring back a traditional strict education and ditch trendy progressive ideas in the classroom? Dave, feel free to spin the music if you like. And folks, we're going to also talk about something very, very important, which is quite simply the issue about the future of this Labour government, okay, who are engulfed in a immigration crisis. We're on the brink, potentially, of an economic collapse. There's unrest on the streets. The polls are at an all-time low. Health Secretary Wes Streeting admits that Labour has failed to convince the public of its project. Well, no sugar, Sherlock. Add to that, a quarter of Labour members are set to back Jeremy Corbyn's new party. Is the left in this country imploding? Can Labour turn this ship around? Will Starmer still be our Prime Minister in 4 years' time? Are we asking a top Labour trade unionist? So lots to get through. I'm also excited to say that later this hour we will be checking in with Talk's very own Kevin O'Sullivan. He's actually not on the road yet because he's having the Bentley polished and they're still vacuuming the back seat. But Kevin will be behind the wheel. He's going to Cornwall for his well-deserved break this bank holiday weekend. And we'll be tracking Kev's journey from leafy Hampstead, the drinks are on Kevin, man of the people, to Cornwall with regular updates on the phone. And Ted, there it is. If you're watching on YouTube, we have a Kev tracker, right? What we've done with Kevin, we've inserted a GPS device within his body, and he'll be tracked to within an inch of his life wherever he goes. So we'll be catching up with Kevin. Cannot wait for that to kick off very shortly. Now, look, folks, we need to talk. Let's get down to brass tacks. The country is crying out for change, and whilst he is way ahead in the polls, is Nigel Farage really the man to deliver the change we need? Or will it be yet more broken promises from an entertaining, charismatic politician who's good on TV? We've had a few of those over the years. Can reform really deliver a Trump-style revolution? Or is it more snake oil populism that has no substance beyond the headlines? Let's speak to Alex Wilson, who is a Reform UK London Assembly member. Good morning, Alex.
Morning, Mark.
Sorry, folks, we're just getting the line to Alex right now because I'll be honest with you, right? This is live radio, it's live telly. That is the beautiful thing. Most TV, right, if you've made the mistake of watching BBC One today or Sky or some other such propaganda nonsense, it's all scripted. And everything is airbrushed, it's all narratives, it's telling you what to think. Well, here we are at Talk, we're live, and we shoot from the hip. And I will tell you that you're shooting from the hip on the message board at the moment. Folks, any communication, chuck it on the screen if you like. But while we do that, this from John in Sutton. Mark, why does Talk quote Margaret... Sorry, let's get this right. John in Sutton. Why... Nigel Farage is the real deal. Boris was an establishment flunky. So let me know whether you agree with that. I mean, this is the problem with Boris, isn't it? Is that there was so much hope invested in him. So many people thought that he was the future of this country and that things were going to get better because we were going to get Brexit done, which is obviously the great hope. And the other thing he was going to do is he was going to restore a sense of democracy in this nation. In the end, Boris could have been the sort of blonde Donald Trump, a sort of fearless, buccaneering, maverick politician. But in the end, as John says, just an establishment stooge, just an industry hack, like all of the others, who was never, ever going to be responsible for lasting change in this country. Mick says the key to sorting out our economy is drill, baby, drill. If we don't, there will be consequences. Well, Mick, you're so right. I mean, one of the problems facing a forthcoming Reform UK government is that it's going to take years to get the energy companies to come back to the UK and invest their billions and billions in drilling. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't just suddenly say, right, we decree that you're going to drill, baby, drill, because they need plans and they need a lead-in for that. It can take 5 years to set up an oil well. And unfortunately, that entire industry has been absolutely cratered by Ed Miliband. And therefore, I mean, this is the big issue with Reform UK is, yes, they may have the best intentions, but will they be thwarted by the blob? Will they have the financial resources to change Britain for the better? And will they have time? Because actually, after the damage of net zero, 5 years, 4 years, it's nothing. It goes in a blink of an eye. Farage needs a decade, let me tell you. Otherwise, we are doomed. So, look, those are my thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. I believe we've got Alex now, do we? Is that right? OK, let's... there you go. I'm delighted to... thank you so much for bearing through one or two small technical glitches. Alex Wilson, Reform UK London Assembly member, welcome to Talk.
Good morning, Mark. Great to be on the show. As you say, a few technical glitches, but that's the joy of live broadcasting, isn't it?
It most definitely is. And what it allowed me to do is actually air my deep concerns about a potential Reform UK government, right? I'm as clear as anyone that we need a political revolution, a Trump-style revolution. Because if you look, Alex, at Donald Trump's record in office, he's improved the terms by which America trades with the world. He has closed the border. He's tackled a war on waste in American government, reduced spending, and of course a war on woke political correctness as well. He's pretty much scrapped net zero on behalf of America, and he's made the United States a country where the leadership fights for the people of the nation, not overseas interests. Can Nigel Farage do the same?
Absolutely, you're right. In Trump's first term, he cut taxes, grew the economy, and he delivered energy independence, and he delivered border security, and he's doing those three things again in his second term. And in many ways, yes, absolutely, it's a model that we need to follow here. I mean, in your preamble, you talked about net zero, energy, and the worry that the oil and gas companies are being hit extremely hard by the current Labour government. And you're right to raise the concern. Can this be turned around quickly enough to make a real impact during the next parliamentary term when hopefully there'll be a Reform UK majority? I think the answer to that has to be yes, and these companies need to be planning to do that investment now, because if things continue as they are in the polling and in the by-election results and all, then we are very clearly looking at a Reform victory in 2029. So they don't need to start planning in 2029. They need to start planning now, and then we'll be ready to hit the ground running, absolutely, if Nigel does enter Downing Street. I mean, just yesterday, another 3 gains in council by-elections. These are happening near enough every week, which is a real measure of progress. Look, the opinion polling is fantastic. This week we had our largest ever lead in opinion polling, but that only shows potential support. It's real votes in real ballot boxes that actually will make the difference. We saw what happened in the local elections in May, where we swept the board and gained outright control of 10 councils and are leading another 2. And say these council by-elections every week, these are real people going out there casting their vote for Reform candidates because they are desperate for change, fed up for too long being let down by both the Conservatives and the Labour Party. This Labour government, normally a new government comes in, as you know, and they have a honeymoon, and for the first 18 months can do no wrong. Well, look, it only took about 8 weeks for the wheels to fall off Starmer. It took 8 years to fall off Blair. So that's what's given us this huge opportunity where, as I say, people are still very fresh in their minds how fed up they are with what the Conservatives did and the broken promises that they enacted in government. That's what's given us opportunity for a new party, a new force to step forwards, and we're absolutely committed to doing that. And yes, Nigel can be a Trump, and he can be a great success, and he will build a successful team around him as well. I know a lot of the media coverage is all about Nigel, and that's crucial, obviously, but he is in the process of building a much broader team around him. We will have people coming into government who've got real experience of running things, and that's the key difference between this government, which we currently have, where not a single one of their cabinet has ever set up a business. They've never had to make those difficult decisions, employing people, sacking people, cutting costs, making things work. We're going to have a huge range of expertise coming into government that will focus absolutely resolutely on getting things done. That's why we will be a success.
Now, Donald Trump spent billions, tens of billions, securing the border, which is why he had to go to Congress to ask for an unprecedented amount of extra borrowing. In fact, the borrowing was so sky high that it caused Elon Musk to part company with the Trump project, even though he'd been such a vociferous campaigner and participant. Musk was furious about the growth in American debt, but Trump did it to close the border. So if we're going to stop the boats and tackle legal net migration as well, which is unsustainable, that's going to cost billions here in the UK. If we're going to have secure streets and more cops and more prison places, it's going to cost money. If we're going to fix our crumbling infrastructure and fill those potholes, it is going, Alex, to cost money. Where's that money going to come from, given that Rachel from Accounts will have decimated the economy by the time Nigel gets in?
Absolutely, it's going to cost money, but at the moment it's costing money to not defend the borders. We're spending almost £5 billion a year just on asylum accommodation alone. And if we can get on top of that problem and make clear deterrents, so that if you come to this country illegally, you will not be able to stay, you will not be put up in these 4-star hotels or in HMOs, you'll be deported. That will save money in the sort of medium term, and that will then enable us to spend that on the priorities that really matter. And net zero, we've talked about already. Huge cost to this country. It will cost us £30 billion a year, there or thereabouts. That's money that can be saved and plugged back into frontline services and tax cuts to grow the economy. We need to grow the economy more quickly. We need to have cheaper energy. We need to really galvanise the private sector, because at the moment we've had jobs being cut month on month on month. Every month since the budget and the national insurance hike, we have a shrinking workforce. We have unemployment rising, and that means that fewer people will be paying tax, fewer people will be contributing, fewer people will be creating economic activity. So that needs to be turned around. It needs a government that has a mindset of being supportive to business and the private sector, because without a dynamic, vibrant, growing private sector, you simply don't have the money to pay for the public services that everybody wants. So that's how we'll do it. Yes, it will be tough. Nothing in politics is easy. We know that. Sorry, that's the dog barking there. But just because something is difficult doesn't mean it's not worth trying. And we simply cannot afford to fail. It's going to cost a lot of money, but it'll cost even more if we don't do this.
Well, before you get devoured by your hound, let me ask you whether you could address some concerns about Nigel Farage, who obviously, I've always argued, is the most consequential politician of his generation, even though for large chunks of his career he hasn't even been a politician. But he is the main reason why Brexit happened, that's quite clear. And now he looks to be at the helm of a significant, maybe seismic political revolution in the UK. He may well do the double, Brexit and then in government in 4 years' time. Some are concerned about his character. He falls out with everyone. Ben Habib, Rupert Lowe, these are good men who my viewers and listeners agree with and love and admire. And really, reform ought to be a broad church, but it seems that Nigel is a little too thin-skinned, a bit too much of a control freak, too much of a diva to put up with anyone that challenges his power and his position.
I don't agree with that. There are people working with Nigel who've been working with Nigel for 20 years, and if he was as you described, then that simply wouldn't be the case. Yes, it's very sad when people part company, and I spent a lot of time working with Ben Habib in the Wellingborough by-election. I was helping to run that campaign, and he was a fantastic candidate. But he's had a difference of opinion and he's moved on, and there are others who have done the same. It's very sad when that happens, but ultimately this mission that we're on is about more than any single individual. It's about saving the country. The way to save the country is to get a reform government, yes, with Nigel Farage at the head of it, but with others as well. I certainly want to be playing my role as we move forwards. We've got a really exciting period to look forward to. We've had the successful local elections just a couple of months ago. Next year, we've got the Welsh Senate elections, the Scottish Parliament elections, and another round of local elections. We're building the branch structure, so we're fighting fit to take on all those challenges. And then obviously, 2 or 3 years' time, the big one, the general election, we will have an outstanding set of candidates. We will have a really strong shadow cabinet, government in waiting, because the stakes are too high. We cannot afford to fail. We all know that. Nigel knows that. The last time I was sat down with him, I could see that real determination in his eyes. He knows this. This prize is there for the taking. And to everybody that wants to make that real difference, my message is very simple: get on board or get out of the way. We need to save our country. That starts with those elections next year, and then it finishes with the general election in 2029.
Are you worried about the Conservatives diluting your vote at the next election?
No, we're on a mission to replace the Conservatives. At the last election, we were told, oh, don't stand, you're splitting the vote. It's nonsense. We have an electoral system. Yes, it makes it difficult. First past the post, you have to have these considerations. But ultimately, we are now comfortably ahead in the opinion polls. We've gained somewhere in the region of 70 council by-elections since the general election, and the bulk of those have come since Kemi was elected as Conservative leader. She is doing a terrible job, hemorrhaging support. We're picking that up. We're also picking up support in Labour areas as well and gaining seats from the Labour Party. It's not just about the dynamic between ourselves and the Conservatives, but we are certainly positioning ourselves as the alternative to this Labour government. And everybody who wants Starmer out, and there must be an awful lot of people out there that want Starmer out, given how terrible this government is being, there's one way to do that. That's to back Reform UK.
Well, my thanks to Alex Wilson and his very well-behaved dog, who finally settled down. Alex Wilson is a Reform UK London Assembly member. Great to have you on the show. Let me know your thoughts on what Alex had to say. 03444 499 1000. I do suspect that if Nigel Farage and Reform win the next election and don't deliver, And if Nigel turns out to be Boris 2.0, then we can all just pack up and go home, can't we? I mean, we'll have to just move to, I don't know, Timbuktu or something, because it really does feel like Britain is in the last chance saloon. But is Nigel the answer? Let me know. We'll get to your calls and messages next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You're listening to Talk. It's Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Alex Phillips. And we've got so many calls coming in and also texts as well. Is Nigel Farage Britain's Donald Trump, or is he going to be, wait for it, Boris Johnson 2.0? Oh, Boris Johnson. Oh, get Brexit done. Oh, another lockdown. Oh, let's bankrupt the country, net zero. Is there a danger of that? This from Lynn in Crowthorne, who says reform cannot possibly be worse than socialist Labour, but hopefully definitely better than the Liberal Conservatives. Let's give them a go, says Lynn. For goodness sake, Mark, stop waving your hands all over the place in front of the cameras. I can't. Do you know why? Because I'm trying to save Britain. That's what I'm trying to do, because we are in trouble. Ange says, hi, Mark, Labour only got in as the rest of the votes split. I'm old enough to remember the 1970s, the 3-day week, rubbish piling up in the streets. It was disastrous. And this from, let's have a look. We've got Ian. We've done that from Ian. Dickie says, we need to set up a charity, go to France and issue each migrant with a T-shirt displaying the St. George's flag. It will be guaranteed on entering our waters that the Navy will be commanded to turn the boats around. Dickie, you are so right. But that's the ultimate contravention these days, isn't it, is having the flag of St. George or the Union Jack. Let's get to your calls now. Peggy is in Essex. Hello, Peggy.
Hello, Mark. Good to see you back.
Thank you.
You cannot compare Nigel Farage with Boris Johnson. For a start, Nigel's brains are not in his trousers. That's where he was down for, Boris Johnson. I mean, and he let us down big time. And we've got to go with Nigel. There's no other choice. And also, how long have we been talking about all these problems? At least 25 years. If we solved the immigrant problem. We've solved all the problems of this country. But everybody's too frightened. But the likes of where I live, when you can't get housing, where people are struggling with schools, they've got to go outside their area, you can't get in the doctors. This country is a disgrace. And it's the psyche of this country that we help other people before we help our own people. And at last, and it only happens when our nose is up against the wall, we've started to say enough is enough. They've pushed us too far. Our good nature has become a joke. They've had the mickey taken out of us big time, and enough is enough.
And do you have any worries or any concerns that Nigel may go soft in office, which many leaders do, that he may find the weight of bureaucracy is against him, or that he's thwarted by the blob?
Well, no, because I think he'll have the people behind him this time. I think people now finally woke up. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone, we never got engaged with politics. Everybody, everywhere you go, we're all talking about the same thing. People, all walks of life, and I thought, you never got that before. There was always the Tories and Labour. Die-hard Labour would vote Labour if it was a bloody monkey put up. But everyone is talking about it in all walks of life. And when you come from areas like this, and they're absolutely disgusted, and all you're doing is working for what? Nothing, but getting robbed blind by this government.
Peggy, brilliant points. I've got to say I agree with every syllable of that. Peggy's got great hopes for a potential reform government. But is it snake oil politics and jam tomorrow? Rod is in London, the capital. Hello, Rod.
Hi. The truth is, Mark, and it is great to have you back on, some animated presenting.
Oh, thank you.
You and Kevin O'Sullivan should never have been moved when you were on your time slot. Anyhow,
oh, thank you.
This is the truth.
Don't get me in trouble with management, Rod. I'll get cancelled again.
Yes, well, sorry, mate.
I'm only kidding.
And your YouTube appearances were brilliant as well. That's the only place we could go to see you.
Oh,
anyhow, forget all that. That is not important. Not Kevin O'Sullivan going down to Cornwall, and not the travel man talking about the usual things. This is what the truth is. There is not one single government in Parliament right now, including Nigel Farage, who will sort this situation out. Because this country, since about 1972, has been run by toffs and intellectuals. We see quite a few toffs on your channel, all of the channels you've been on, and intellectuals who at 21 have suddenly become government advisors, which has always been the case. And the other thing is that we have a very lazy population in this country. We've known immigration has been a problem since about 1973. We've all seen it. We didn't say much. We didn't do much. And actually, we're not doing much now. Do you know what the population is of Epping town is? It's about 8,000. Not Epping Forest, but 8,000. And only about 250 of them, and about maybe 300, showed up to the hotel. And congratulations to the people that did. But we have lazy British people who will get on the phone, they'll do this, do that, but they're going to have to be pushed much further. And my other point is, without going on too long, is that there's only one type of government this country needs for about 10 years, and that's a dictatorship, a good dictatorship, a responsible conservatism who will not take any notice, whether that's the army or whatever kind of group, before the public eventually, because it will be too late when the public mass riots. And, oh, no, be peaceful, be peaceful. The government won't take any notice of people who peacefully protest. And I have to say, even online media are a bit complicit in this. You guys on internet media, including your channel, GB News, weren't even there when the good people of Epping that did show up showed up. You even now, you show new media video clips of very important things. And I don't know about you. Have you watched some of these citizen journalists who just keep their camera rolling when we get to see when no one shows up and when they all show up, the good people that have shown up? We have to rely on We have to rely on internet new media to see all those things.
And you're saying we should be there too?
You should be. And you should be there this weekend. I bet you're not. I bet you all show up about 4 hours too late when there's just a few people around, while ITV and BBC continue to show certain clips of the first night at Epping when there was a little bit of trouble. You are all complicit. Look where we are now. Coming up to the end of August, everyone's still on holiday, including the media types from Julia Hartley-Brewer to all the MPs.
Don't get me in trouble with Julia.
Well, she's on holiday, and you all go abroad.
She's the hardest working woman in showbiz. She needs a break.
Well, she may be. She may be. The thing about it is, we get to see these politicians in their oak beam cottages talking on your channels. You think, oh, I bet you're in the middle of Suffolk somewhere. No problem at all. Do you know what? I watched the Norwich demonstration last night on social media. There were about 30 people there. That's how concerned the people of Norwich are about their local hotels and houses of multi-occupation. That's how problematic they feel that is. They had about 30 people there. Very disappointing. So maybe they do need this government a little bit of violence and a little bit of real protest before they actually do anything.
Now, of course, Rod, you know, that's something that we cannot condone is violence, and that would be counterproductive. But I do take your point that, you know, even outlets like ourselves need to be more present at the scene. And I'm going to take that on board, and I'm going to take the slap on the wrist, and I'm going to agree with you that actually we should have reporters in places like that, where there's a protest, where people are angry, before BBC and Woke ITV call everyone far right. So I think I actually take your criticism. We will be speaking, Rod, to Sarah White, who's an Epping Forest resident, mum and campaigner, at 12:20 today. But you are right that what we've got to do is actually understand the people power at play here. And I guess what you're saying is support these folks.
Yes, well, of course, we don't want violence. But what I'm saying is that's the only thing this government understands. Look how quickly they reacted to when Sheffield was kicking off, Rotherham was kicking off. But they must be very peed off in northern towns, having all this crap that's handed to them. Yeah. But they've been dealing with it for decades. You talk about 20 years. This has been going on since 1973. Yeah. People have had enough. But the Brits have got to show up and be peaceful, but in their thousands.
Well, I think you're right, because, of course, if you think about it, look at the poll tax riots. That was a seismic political moment, and it led Mrs. Thatcher to reverse the whole policy.
That's why we need a dictatorship, and that is why no government, no politician, including Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe, will solve this. What happens when Nigel Farage gets into government, which I'm sure he will do, and he has a heart attack? What spineless, chinless wonder is going to take it there? Another toff? Another intellectual?
I know what you mean about the graduate class, by the way. They're the same people that inflicted the lockdowns on us during COVID, the so-called experts. And I had numpties on this show when I was doing Drive back in the day, Rod. Financial experts telling me, oh, don't worry about printing money, it's all cost neutral. Yeah. And apparently I was the idiot at the time. Well, look at the state of the country now. So I agree with you about the lanyard class, the metropolitan elite, the graduates who have basically, you know, taken our hand and walked us into hell. Yes. But before you go, I mean, obviously you've got concerns, but the dictatorship, that's a bit silly, Rod.
No, it's not a bit silly. I tell you what, if the army took over and said, right, we're going to close down lots of troublesome streets, we are going to remove these people, it's going to happen, it's not going to require legislation, we're just going to take over. I'm not talking about Hitler or Stalin. I'm talking about responsible capitalism, where everyone who needs to be looked after is looked after. The trouble is the toffs and the intellectuals will not allow Nigel Farage, because they're everywhere, to move this stuff on.
I don't disagree with you, Rod, and I think that the mad woke ideas like 100 genders and demonising British history all comes from the graduate class. It all comes from hyper-educated university, Oxbridge numpties who have lovely houses in North London with sprawling gardens. Rod, stay in touch with me. And I like the fact that you've given me a little bit of a handbagging there about our network and about big media outlets making sure that they're actually listening to what people are angry about and, where possible, being at those demonstrations and giving ordinary people a voice. Rod, I shall raise my game. I shall do my best, and I know everyone else will at Talk. And with that in mind, we do have a furious Epping mum who's joining us in the next hour, excellently booked by Ted, our first excellent erstwhile producer today. Folks, so much more to come. More of your calls and texts, absolutely, we're going to do that. But let me also tell you that, you couldn't make it up sometimes. So you will have heard yesterday, Axel Radicabana, who's the evil monster that killed 3 little girls in Southport, has had his DVD and TV privileges given back because the prison officers are begging him to behave after he threw boiling water at one of their colleagues. This guy should be in solitary confinement for the next decade. Instead, he's watching, Netflix and Breaking Bad or something on a flat screen telly at your expense. So the latest story is an Albanian murderer, who should, by the way, be in Albania, not the United Kingdom. An Albanian murderer has been doing TikTok videos from his prison cell. How is that possible? We'll find out next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Opinions are very strong in regard to illegal immigration in this country, not just the migrant hotels, but the legal net migration figures, which are through the roof. I mean, I was listening to a programme about Germany yesterday, and they had 1 million people a few years ago under Angela Merkel, and that was the big thing, that Angela's 1 million, when she said refugees welcome. She did that, that was 1 year. We've done that every year. We've had the Angela Merkel million for a decade. So, how about this from Goff, who says, Mark, why don't we put the illegal immigrants in disused warehouses, give them a tent and say, there you go, until they're processed? Very simple. On Lucy Connolly, I've got this from an unnamed listener. Mark, the likes of Joe Brand, the comedian, can get away with saying in public that throwing a milkshake at Nigel Farage is a waste when we have battery acid. Even a milkshaking is a mock execution and can be terrifying. Well, you're absolutely right about that. One rule for them, another rule for the rest of us. It seems to be based on your politics, doesn't it? Keep those messages coming and I'll get to your calls shortly, but wait for this. An Albanian murderer has shared a TikTok video from his British prison cell begging to be transferred to a jail in his home country so he can see his family and avoid the terrible food here. Ugat Merizad is reportedly posting on social media after being handed a 32-year sentence in May 2022 for the shotgun killing of a rival drug dealer. Now, using a mobile phone behind bars is illegal, but guards at HMP Manchester seem incapable of stopping the thug, who has even live-streamed himself playing online games for tokens that are being exchanged for cash. This is a British prison, and it's a man with a mobile phone. Why has he got a mobile phone? Why do you have a telephone when you're in prison? And he's recording videos. How's he got the Wi-Fi and a 5G plan with, you know, EE or BT or whatever they're called? How is this happening in 2025? I'm delighted to welcome David Shipley, a former prisoner, writer and researcher on prison and justice issues. David, welcome to the show.
Hi there.
David, thank you very much for joining us. Are you able to hear me okay? There was a look of hesitation in your eyes.
Yeah, sorry, there was a little delay there.
Well, no, I'm delighted that you've joined us on the show. I don't expect prisons just to be, you know, a bare bed and a urinal and that's the end of it, because we would hope to rehabilitate folks so that when they leave prison, they can make a contribution to society, turn their life around. I'm all for that. But the idea that you've got access to a phone as a mass murderer and you're able to do TikTok videos strikes me as beyond the pale.
Well, it is, but it's so widespread. I mean, I think the reality that people need to understand is that mobile phones, smartphones, are trivially accessible in prison if you're prepared to pay for them. I think last year the MOJ announced they found over 10,000 phones. And what's worse is that actually this is against the law, but there are almost no prosecutions for possession of phones. No one's getting extra time on their sentences, really. People just get these phones seized. In some cases, I know those seized phones end up making their way back onto the wings because they've been sold or provided by staff. You know, the whole thing points to this moral corruption and collapse in the prison system.
Most definitely. And how do we fix it? Because the problem is that any talks of prison reform and toughening things up involves money, and the cupboard's bare. That's an issue, isn't it? Resource.
Well, look, the prison service is understaffed and under-resourced, and that's true. But actually, even if you provided it with all the money and staffing it needed, you would still have this moral corruption in the system. You would still have a leadership which doesn't want to make sure the rules are enforced, which doesn't really care about stopping drug taking, for example, because a huge amount of drug taking in prisons is allowed. You know, that doesn't really seem to care about stopping drone flights into prisons because they've essentially stopped serious efforts to interdict those drones and track them back to source. That's a leadership culture, and that's a choice. Yeah. And you don't have to have more money to decide to enforce the rules. You have to have the willpower to do it.
So you would suggest there's an issue with the culture in our jails and the management?
Absolutely, a leadership culture issue, yeah. You know, there are prisons all over the country where drone flights are known to be a huge issue, bringing in phones, bringing in drugs, sometimes bringing in weapons. And prison governors haven't even done the most basic things like putting up anti-drone netting, even months and months and months after they've been.
Why? Because that's a small and inexpensive measure.
It's a great question. I think the difficulty is sometimes it's very hard to distinguish between incompetence and malice when it's at this extreme. You know, either the leadership is entirely incompetent or they are maliciously trying to undermine good order in the prison system. But in any event, if they're not bothering to prosecute people for phone seizures, if they're not bothering to do basic anti-drone mechanisms, they're not really bothered about stopping drug taking at a significant scale, the harm done by that is huge. But that's the issue here. We need a leadership refresh, I would say. I think a lot of the leadership of HMPPS need to be replaced.
Which has parallels with the police service, wouldn't you say? Again, the issue we have with policing, yes, resource is a factor, but you know, the philosophy and the culture of modern policing leadership is, you know, these two issues run in parallel, and then you've got the judiciary.
Absolutely. I think the police, because they're a bit more visible, are probably not quite as bad as the prison service. Because prison is a secret place that exists behind walls, the scale of moral rot within it is less known, I think.
Wow.
I'm writing a book about this at the moment, exploring, quite how lawless our prison system is.
So you would use the term moral rot. I mean, can you give me an example of moral rot within those institutions?
Yeah, I mean, it ranges from really simple stuff like the regularity with which prison officers will smell drugs being smoked in a cell and do nothing about it. Right. Because actually it's a lot of effort to go and open a cell door and confront someone and take their drugs off them. And if they are stoned on cannabis or on spice, they're probably not a problem. So that's an example of just taking the easy route. Similarly, prisoners who are a problem, who cause disorder, are often placated and effectively rewarded. When I was a prisoner, I remember seeing a man being given an Xbox because he was being destructive. It's almost sort of bad parenting, isn't it? If your toddler is kicking off and you give them sweets to get them to quieten down, what you're actually doing is teaching them that bad behaviour is rewarded with sweets. And you see a lot of that culture in prison. And really, almost everyone in prison is there because they've broken society's rules. And we should have a prison system which teaches prisoners to follow the rules, like you said, to be rehabilitated, to change their lives, to be pro-social, not anti-social. And actually in prison we see a system where the rules don't really matter, they're applied inconsistently, and in fact prisoners learn the exact opposite lesson to what they should. So that's what I mean by moral rot, the system which just doesn't really care about the rules and the law.
Briefly, David, you spent time inside and you've since turned your life around and you're a best-selling author now with a new book on the way. If you had your magic wand, notwithstanding the financial constraints that the country currently faces and will likely face for the foreseeable, what would you do to make Britain's prisons more effective?
I think the first thing is to root out the moral corruption and the often actual criminal corruption as well. So that means we need to set up a sort of Elliot Ness-style untouchable squad, probably part of the NCA, which would go into prisons targeting corruption all the way up to the leadership of HMPPS and really rooting it out. That it has to start there. We have to get organised crime and corruption out of our prison system.
David, thank you so much for your wisdom and insight on this issue. You've been there, you've got the T-shirt. My thanks to David Shipley, former prisoner, now best-selling author, writer and researcher on prison and justice issues, David Shipley. Next up, it's all about reform, because so many of you want change in this country and you feel that Nigel is your only hope. But is there a danger that he'll let you down? And if that happens, where do we go from there? That's next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, we have a time for the long-awaited, much-heralded appearance of Talk legend Kevin O'Sullivan on this programme. And it's 12:20. We're going to connect with Kevin O'Sullivan, who's going off on his holidays, a well-deserved break to Cornwall, because you see, Kevin is a patriot. He's not going to Ibiza, where, you know, with the youngsters and all of the stuff, the pills they put. That's not Kevin's scene. Kevin's old school, and he's going to be in a country pub in Cornwall, and rightly so. So he's on his way, and at 12:20, we're going to connect with him. But if you are watching on YouTube, we've actually got a Kevin tracker. Kevin received a medical procedure yesterday in which GPS was inserted very intimately. I can't lie, I've seen the video. It was not for the faint-hearted, let me tell you. And so now we're following him. And so if you watch on YouTube, you'll see where Kev is. He's left the capital. He's left leafy Hampstead, and he's well on his way in towards the direction of Cornwall. So we'll connect with the brilliant and wonderful Kevin O'Sullivan at 12:20. I'm looking forward to that. A couple of texts before we get to calls. This from an unnamed listener. Mark, someone mentioned the Attorney General earlier, Richard Hermer. My God, check his Wikipedia page. Can't believe this piece of work has stayed under the radar. He's 10 times worse than Starmer. Toxic, in my opinion, and he is the Attorney General. Good morning, Mark. Travelling to work in the city on the tube this morning. The homeless bloke opposite with his feet on the seat. At first thought that I'd be a Londoner and very polite about it and say nothing. Then I decided to be a Kiwi, and politely ask him to take his feet off the seat. You can imagine the usual abuse. Eventually, he thought better of it and started shuffling off, but not before turning around and spitting in my direction. I've reported it to the British Transport Police, but what a palaver. And that's why I said I'd prefer not to give my details, which I think puts me at the bottom of the pile. Welcome to Sadiq's London. Well, can I thank you for being such a courageous Kiwi? We know the Australians and Kiwis, right? The Aussies and Kiwis. They've got a little bit of spunk, haven't they? Do you know what I mean? They don't take any nonsense. And I respect that. And that's what we need more people to do, right? We need the public to step up to antisocial behaviour. The problem you've got now is if you confront someone in any of our great cities, that you can't be sure that the person won't pull a knife on you, and you can't also be sure that if you were to give them a right hook in self-defence, that you're the one that goes to prison. Because we live in a completely dystopian universe now where left is right and right is wrong. Let's get to George, who's in Portsmouth, and I believe is a councillor in Portsmouth. Am I right, sir?
That's right, yeah, good morning.
Thanks for calling in. Nigel Farage, what happens if he fails to deliver for Britain following a potential election victory in 4 years' time? This will be a catastrophe. Is there a danger he'll be Boris 2.0?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Nigel's always been a man of principle as far as I'm concerned, and anything he's ever said he's followed through with to the best of his ability. I mean, at the end of the day, the thing that I think most of us can all agree on is that the current two, i.e. Tories and Labour, are completely incompetent and completely unable to run a country. I mean, they've both proven that now over years. And we need to look at a viable alternative. And Nigel, to be fair to him, at all stages, he's always stayed transparent. He's always stayed on one track. And I think the country needs to have some faith in him. And fingers crossed, we deliver.
Well, that's always the hope, isn't it? Tell me about the asylum protests, asylum hotel protests in your area. Are things escalating there, George?
I mean, we were one of the first people to start having protests at the hotels. They've been going on for several months now.
Right.
And they're every single Friday at the Royal Beach Hotel. But this week we've got a huge festival on called the Victorious Festival. So the protesters have rearranged their protest to 12:30, so in 30 minutes' time today outside the civic offices. But this is mainly a protest in relation to HMOs being used to house migrants, which is obviously a story that broke last week, where we discovered that Portsmouth, the majority, 89% in fact, of asylum seekers actually aren't in the hotels in Portsmouth. They're actually being already mixed within communities, and they've been given family homes and HMOs to live in. So that's what the protesters are going on today at 12:30, and we hope for a peaceful one, of course.
Well, indeed, because yes, there is such anger about hotels being used for housing asylum seekers. It's the cost. And you know as well as I do, especially in a brilliant place like Portsmouth, that some of those hotels, they have history. People have got married there, births, deaths, marriages. You know, it's a focal point. It's where you take your granny for afternoon tea. And those institutions are now completely appropriated by illegal migrants. It's a blight. But the issue is that when they leave the hotels, they do go somewhere else. The big challenge for a future government is to stop the supply.
Well, I don't think it should be a big challenge. I think it should be quite a realistic, easy challenge, and it's that we put these people that enter the country through illegal methods into safe detention centres. You know, I don't see why that's a controversial thing. Not only would it be safe for them, but it'd be safe for the general public. It'd be cheaper to run. And we've got massive amounts of sites across the country, ex-military bases, ex-prisons, ex-hospitals, which have all been closed down that we can absolutely refurbish for this purpose. You know, and these people need to have their asylum claims processed. And then, in my opinion, they need to be deported if they've entered through illegally. But, you know, fundamentally, they don't need to be within our communities. At the end of the day, we don't know if these people are safe people or not safe people. We don't know if they've committed crimes or not committed crimes. And that is a risk. At the end of the day, that is a risk to our general population. And they need to be detained until such time we can analyse the risk and know it is safe for the people that already live.
Well, it's been well reported that there are terror links with some people that have crossed the channel in the last few years. The Mail did a brilliant exclusive on that some months ago, and the security services know that some of these folks do wish ill on the country and our fellow citizens, George. But the other issue, so when you say detain, are we depriving these folk of their freedom in an ideal world? Are you suggesting that they enter the country illegally, they're detained in a, let's say, a repurposed army barracks, and they do not have liberty? Is that what you're saying?
They're not allowed to walk the streets. No, at the end of the day, they've committed a crime by entering the country. They've come here without documentation. At the end of the day, the UK government have a duty of care to protect its citizens. That's the first and foremost duty.
So
of
they're
care
jailed. So asylum seekers, refugees are jailed. I mean, that's going to take an awful lot of legal and legislative gymnastics to pull off, isn't it?
Well, look, you know, you can word it how you want, but at the end of the day, and obviously the government choose the law of the day. The government of the day choose the law. They can amend it and they can change it and they can do what they need to do to make it happen. But at the end of the day, you know, and this isn't just protecting the safety of residents on the streets. This is protecting the safety of them as well, you know, because there is hostilities, there is conflicts. We know for a fact that these people are committing crimes in certain areas and violent crimes. We've had it in Portsmouth, really violent crimes by these people, and we're having mass protests. This means that we're using police resources, council resources. It's costing a fortune to manage this situation, and we need to look at alternatives. The hotel and HMO system is not working. We have to have a viable alternative, and I can't see why it's controversial that if somebody illegally breaks into your country without any form of documentation or visa, that we detain them until such time we can ascertain who they are and whether they're a danger to society. And I would challenge anybody that thinks that that's a silly idea.
George, great call, and thank you very much for contacting us. Local Portsmouth Councillor for Reform, George Madgwick. I agree with George, but the issue is for Nigel's 4 years or 5 years if he wins the next election, is whether legally he'll be able to do that, given the Human Rights Act and the ECHR and all that stuff. Yes, they want to tear it up, but there will be total legal warfare in contravention of any hopes that Reform have of tackling this issue. And you do worry that in the end, a policy like that to detain on arrival, unfortunately, I'd love it, but it might be pie in the sky. Let's get a voice note from Mark on Reform.
Hi, Mark. Welcome back. Great show, by the way.
Thank you.
I think for Reform, we're going to need at least 2 terms.
Yeah.
They're going to need the first term to rip out the decision makers in the civil service, because that's rotten to the core, and they do hold a lot of the strings, to be fair. And I think they've got the skill set to crack on and really do well. But I do think they're going to probably need 2 terms. Thanks, bye.
I completely agree with you. Thank you for the kind words. And yes, that's the issue. 5 years won't touch the sides. We need a decade at least, which is what Mrs Thatcher had in the 80s. Will, you get the last word in the hour. You're in Sussex.
Hi, Mark. Great to have you back.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been listening to it all morning, and obviously there's this enthusiasm for a reform-led government by Nigel, but realistically, I cannot see them going from 4 to 326 MPs, and that's just to have a majority of 1. Then even maybe if they got another 10, they'd have a majority of maybe 10. They're going to have to come to an arrangement. They know this. Obviously, they don't want to do it. They don't want to explicitly say it now because there's still time to go. But they know, and I actually think the one person who does know this is Robert Jenrick, because in his leadership campaign, although he lost, his leadership campaign, he said that he would make Jacob Rees-Mogg, even though he was no longer an MP, he would make him chairman of the Conservative Party. And we all know that he was going to do that because Jacob Rees-Mogg can form a dialogue with Reform. He can open the channels and come to some arrangement. I mean, it would be ridiculous to look if Reform stand against the Conservatives in, say, places like Chichester or Tunbridge Wells. You're going to be still left with the Liberal Democrats. Likewise, it will be stupid now for the Conservative Party to run in constituencies like Dover or Dartford. You know, it's got to be done this way. And also, as well, they have no representation in the Lords. So if they were to win, to get legislation through, they're going to have to make sure they've got a manifesto as watertight as a mermaid bra. They've got to be explicit, saying that should they win, they will get rid of the Supreme Court.
Will, the clock's against us. Words of wisdom. Thank you for that. That was fascinating. We'll react to your comments in the next hour. Plus, Wes Streeting thinks the public don't like Labour. Too right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I've got the dream team today on the other side of the glass. We've got Ted, Jana, we've got Alicia, and we've got Dave on the buttons. And I'm taking your calls 0344 499 1000. From 12:30, you and I are going to talk, right? Clues in the name. Get your views across. Are you hopeful that Nigel Farage, if he wins the next election, can deliver the change we need? Is he Trump number 2, or is he Boris Johnson rehashed? And will the establishment, will the blob let him change Britain for the better? Surely people power is our only hope. Now, Britain's kids are failing English and maths at record levels, and now the government are planning to scrap obligatory resets, sparking fears that academic standards will plunge further. Is it time to bring back a traditional, strict education and ditch trendy, progressive ideas in the classroom? I'll be speaking to a man who knows education inside out from the Campaign for Real Education. I think we should go back to the Victorian era, where you get your collar felt if you get your spelling wrong. Time for a bit of discipline in this country. Also, I'm excited to say that Kevin O'Sullivan, talk legend, is on his way to Cornwall for his holidays, the bank holiday weekend. He's a patriot, so he's investing his money, his many thousands, into the British economy and into, let's be very honest, some local pubs in Cornwall. And he's on his way, he's in the car, and we've actually got a tracker. It's a Kev tracker. It's on YouTube right now, and you'll see that he's already a good 50 miles outside of the capital, on his way. His well-deserved break, and we'll connect with Kevin in just a few minutes' time. But first, let's kick off with this. Labour have not done enough to persuade voters that their plans will change Britain for the better. This according to Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary. Well, I think we can throw in a no-sugar Sherlock there if you look at the polls and if you listen to the calls that I've taken on Talk today alone. The Health Secretary said the party had not put forward a coherent enough story about how it wanted to improve the country. His remarks follow a turbulent first 13 months in power, which has seen Sir Keir Starmer's approval rating sink to a record low as Rishi Sunak before the last election, which we thought was a low, but then we got a new low, and it's just going to go down from there. Well, let's get the views now of a very old friend of mine, someone I've admired for a long time, and he's certainly been a colleague in the past, Paul Embury, trade unionist and author of the best-selling Despised: Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class. Paul, welcome to the show. What's Wes Streeting up to with these remarks?
Well, I think... hello, Mark, by the way. Good to see you again.
Hello.
I think the Health Secretary is frankly just being honest. I mean, Labour has got, I think, a serious problem that is indicated now in pretty much every opinion poll we're seeing. Its popularity, so much as it had any popularity, has pretty much nosedived since the last general election. Yes, it won a landslide, but I think it was what one perceptive writer called a loveless landslide. Labour didn't kind of roar to power because people were so enthusiastic about Keir Starmer and the party. They won, I think, because the Tories were so loathed and people felt so betrayed by the party, by the Conservative Party. And Labour made all sorts of promises, as we know, that it was going to get growth into the economy, that it was going to stop the boats, that it was going to get NHS waiting lists down. Three of the top priorities, I think, for voters in this country. And all three of those things, Mark, they have not made sufficient progress. In fact, if you look at the boats, boats were recently at record numbers. And I think the problem for the party now is, I think the history of British politics shows that once a government becomes unpopular, once it starts scraping along the bottom in terms of the popularity stakes in the opinion polls, it's very difficult to recover. I remember 1992 when the Tories beat Labour, Major beat Kinnock in 92 when few people were expecting it. And then 6 months later, we had Black Wednesday when we crashed out of the exchange rate mechanism and interest rates shot up. And the Conservatives lost their reputation for economic credibility. Once that had happened, even though later on the economy turned around and by the time 1997 came, the economy was in a pretty strong position, they were so unpopular, people didn't forget, and they were not able to recover that popularity that they secured in the election in 92. I think Labour is potentially in that position now. Unless it does something quickly, it could find that the die is cast.
Well, that's right. I was talking to Trevor Kavanagh earlier, the former political editor of The Sun, and I said I'm surprised that Keir Starmer, who's the king of the U-turn, hasn't made a pivot whether it comes to, net zero and the cost of energy, or the illegal immigration crisis, legal net migration, or indeed on economic measures. Keir Starmer's quite happy to change his mind. Why do you think he's so dug in with what appears to be a failing agenda?
Well, first of all, I think Keir Starmer is in many senses a hostage to his party. I mean, some of the things that Labour really needs to do to get back in touch with working class people in this country, the red wall communities, taking a tough line on things like law and order, on things like immigration and so on, challenging the consensus of cultural progressivism, which frankly, has infected large numbers of our political and cultural and creative and educational and corporate institutions. Much of the Labour Party is still a party for the professional and managerial classes. And even though Starmer and his advisors have sometimes taken the line of, look, we've got to start talking about the importance of family, community, nation, all of those, if you like, those small C issues that chime with the impulses of small town Britain, of blue collar Britain, of working class Britain, they're very, very uncomfortable with it. If he were to pivot on some of that stuff, I think the party at large would probably come for him. And I don't think he really gets that stuff instinctively anyway. I mean, let's not forget, he is a North London Liberal lawyer. He's very much in the guise of Tony Blair. So when he does talk about some of these small C conservative issues, the ones that chime with the red wall community, he's not doing it out of instinct. I think he's doing it out of expediency.
So you would say that this latest incarnation of the Labour Party is not serving the working class any better than let's say, the Blairite era?
No, I don't think it is particularly, if I'm honest, and that disappoints me. I mean, the Labour Party at its best throughout its history was always an electoral coalition between, what I've called Hampstead and Hartlepool.
Yeah.
So, Hartlepool being the blue-collar working class base of the Labour Party, the kind of people and towns and communities that the Labour Party was created to represent in the first place. And if you like, the more middle-class, white-collar, liberal intelligentsia, which has always brought something to the table and I think has got a home in the party. But over the last 30 years, and this is what my book that you talked about in the introduction, Mark, was essentially about, was how that coalition became fractured and how the interests and the priorities of Hampstead came to dominate, and the interests of Hartlepool essentially got elbowed out. And the Labour Party for years thought that the Hartlepools of this world would have nowhere else to go, that they would always vote Labour so they could be taken for granted. But of course, that changed, and those communities, first of all, started abstaining in large numbers in the early part of this century. Then they flocked towards parties like UKIP and the BNP, as they did in my home community of Barking and Dagenham. And then in 2019, they voted for the Tories in large numbers because they thought Boris Johnson was the answer. So I think that realignment that has taken place has destroyed those old certainties, those old tribal loyalties. So now Labour simply cannot take those votes for granted and has got a hell of a task in trying to win them back.
Most definitely. And I think that certainly the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and most likely the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, are in for a torrid 12 months. We've got social unrest in relation to illegal immigration and asylum seekers housed in hotels. There's also the small matter, Paul, of a quite significant and looming financial crisis. I think that those Rolex-wearing international financiers who are bankrolling Britain as we speak the sharks are circling. We've got big economic problems, and it's going to be a very tough next year for Labour, isn't it?
Well, the thing Labour needs to do is to get growth into the economy quickly, because people's living standards have fallen over the last 20 years. They're struggling to make ends meet. In some cases, they're still struggling to pay the bills. How do you get growth? You get growth in the economy essentially by raising demand and investing. Now, you cannot cut your way to growth. It's as simple as that. I'm somebody on the economic left, and I don't believe that the answer is to make huge public spending cuts, because what you're doing then is sucking money out of the economy, when actually you need to be making sure that you invest in order that you can stimulate activity in the economy. That said, I don't necessarily think that at a time when the economy is flatlining, as it pretty much is at the moment, the right thing to do is just to levy taxes on people. Now, don't misunderstand me. I believe that there are hideous inequalities in wealth and income in this country that needs to be closed. Those gaps need to be closed. And I've got no issue in principle with rich people paying more. But there's a time and a place to do that. And if you tax people too much at a time when the economy itself is struggling, then essentially you are making it harder for yourself to be able to achieve growth. And then, of course, if you do achieve growth, you increase your tax revenues. You've then got taxes to be able to spend on public services and so on. But at the moment, I don't think the Labour Party and the Chancellor knows precisely what to do. They're in a bind. And I think that the problem for her is that unless she reconciles herself to the fact that we need shock therapy economically in this country, and we need, I think, massive investment in some of our crumbling infrastructure and public services and ending the chronic housing shortage and so on, then that growth isn't going to come.
Yes, before you go, I mean, it's not surprising that the left in this country, working class people sort of outside of the sort of metropolitan areas, are flocking to Nigel Farage. Do you think he can deliver for them? Because I would suggest that although you don't share the politics of Nigel Farage, there are many issues upon which you agree. Well,
I mean, I don't think reform is the answer for working class people, but there is no doubt that they have tapped in to a sentiment of deep resentment in many of our working class communities, and have their finger on the pulse when it comes to what some of those communities are demanding. Farage has said quite rightly that we need to get immigration numbers down. He said that our institutions are kind of have embraced this agenda of wokery and cultural progressivism that doesn't sit well with mainstream voters. The country is essentially undeveloped in so many ways. People feel deracinated. They feel that they don't recognise their country in many communities now, and so they have turned to reform in some of those communities. The Labour Party is in danger, I think, of being outflanked by reform. Reform came second in 98 constituencies at the last general election, 89 of which were Labour constituencies, 60 of which were in the north of England. So in that respect, reform has very much parked its tanks on Labour's lawns. And unless Labour starts delivering on all of those things that I outlined at the top of the chat, then I think we're just going to see reform eating into their vote more and more.
You are, of the left, certainly economically anyway, maybe culturally now more on the Conservative side, Paul, because let's be honest, we're all on a spectrum, aren't we? And all you really stand for are the things that we all agreed on back in the 1990s, but which now make you far right, which is quite crazy. Surely you'd rather have, if I gave you a choice now, Prime Minister Keir Starmer versus Prime Minister Nigel Farage. It's Farage all day long, isn't it?
Well, look, I mean, I've been a Labour man all my life, Mark. I've been an active trade unionist all my life. I believe that the Labour Party and the Labour movement is the vehicle by which ordinary people in this country, working class people, have traditionally improved their lot in life. It's very difficult sometimes to hold on to that view in the current climate, but nonetheless, I do just about still believe it. But I am fighting to make the Labour Party and the Labour movement more representative of working class people, which it's pretty much fouled on abysmally over the last 30 years.
Paul, always a thrill to catch up with you, and well worth a follow on X, by the way. Paul Embry's Twitter feed is outstanding and compelling, as is his book, which was a bestseller, and that wasn't an accident, because it's full of fascinating and important, truths about how Labour as a party have completely disowned the working class of this country. The book is called Despised: Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class, Paul Embry. And thank you very much. Your calls next. Plus, I'm on the trail of Kevin O'Sullivan, who is on his way to Cornwall by car. I think he's driving. I think the chauffeur's had the day off. And we're going to catch up with Kevin. There he is. If you're watching on YouTube, he's on the Kev tracker with that handsome smiling face of his. He's well towards the West Country now, I'm delighted to say. He's outside of London, finally. He's left his woke metropolitan bubble. And we'll catch up with Kevin and your calls next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
All over the countryside, says Gough, there are brand new warehouses that have been empty for years. Put the illegal immigrants in there. Very simple. Mick in Wallington says, Mark, I wonder if Starmer and his disciples know that they will never be able to walk down a British high street again. And Sally, very kind words about my return to Talk at the Home of Common Sense. Thank you, Sally. And she said, every time I hear the news, I feel like I've woken up in a Monty Python sketch. Only it's not funny, it's a nightmare. General election now, says Sally. I'll get to your calls shortly. But, you know, when you are on air and you're presenting a show like this on Talk, you always want to have the big names, you know, and you want the Prime Minister, you want the President of the United States. You want Tom Cruise, don't you? Who else do you want? You know, you're looking for... I don't know, Taylor Swift maybe? That wouldn't be bad. Well, we've gone one better, because I'm now delighted to go live to the chauffeur-driven Bentley, owned by none other than Talk star Kevin O'Sullivan. Hey, Kev.
Hello, Mark. How are you doing?
Listen, I'm so well. You've left your rather well-appointed Hampstead home.
We have.
And you and your lovely betrothed are on your way to Cornwall. Can I salute you, first of all? You are a true patriot, and you're putting your money, which is, let's be honest, a lot of money, back into the British economy this weekend.
Yeah, it's a staycation, but don't salute me too much. We have to do it because we have a very an old dog, and we can't leave him with anyone, so we can't really go abroad. But otherwise, I would be on a plane somewhere. However, here I am on the M4. Now, in terms of this being the worst traffic day of the year, so far, we've just come past Windsor Castle. So far, I'm sailing along at 70 miles an hour. However, we're heading towards Bristol, and then we have to go across the junction to the M5. Now, I suspect that we are actually driving towards the gates of hell. So I think it might get worse. At the moment, fingers crossed, it's absolutely fine.
Well, that's the problem. Our viewers and listeners, they get punished by having a staycation, don't we? The message from the authorities is clear. We're going to have roadworks, we're going to have rail strikes, and if you go on holiday in this country, it's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, there's two things about that. You're absolutely right. You know, the train workers, road workers, everybody seems to go on strike to make it as difficult as possible during the summer. But the other deterrent, if you like, to a staycation, as I say, we are forced to go on a staycation. It is incredibly expensive. I mean, next year I'm off to the south of France because it's going to be a lot cheaper than Cornwall, I'll tell you that.
Well, Kevin, I've got to say that I reckon James May, Richard Hammond and Jeremy Clarkson need to look over their shoulder, because I'm very impressed by your driving style. You have an authority behind the wheel.
Yeah, I think I have a natural sense of aura of authority in everything I do, and certainly on the road I'm very authoritative, to the point where I scream and shout at all other drivers. Ask my wife. We had our first row, by the way. Here we are on a, what is it, impossible 6-hour journey. We had our first row about 5 minutes into it. We hadn't even got out of Hampstead, so it doesn't bode well.
Well, we know, Kevin, and that's why we love you, that you could have an argument with your own reflection, and that's why you are so indispensable here at Talk, which is all about argument, all about opinion. What's the plan in Cornwall? I would imagine a lot of it involves local hostelries, would be my guess.
Yeah, but there'll be a lot of drinking. We're drinking to forget that we're not in the Mediterranean. We'll go to some local restaurants, take the dog to beaches. Our dog takes about 20 yards, takes about 3 hours because he's getting old. But we'll make the best of it, Mark. We'll make the best of it.
Well, listen, I'm worried about Talk's ratings because you have got, as you know, a growing army of fans. They're going to be deprived of Kevin O'Sullivan for a couple more days. But you are back, Kevo, and am I right in thinking you're back on air on Tuesday nights?
Well, no, I'm back on air in 2 weeks.
Oh, for goodness sake.
I've been working flat out for 5 months. Even heroes like me need holidays.
Well, bang goes.
Lots more work for you, Mark, hopefully.
Well, I don't know. I feel sorry for the listeners. Bang goes the talk share price. O'Sullivan has fled. But he'll be back in 2 weeks. Listen, Kevin, so great to chat. Love to the missus, who, let's be honest, has excellent taste in men. She's the luckiest girl in the world, next to Mrs. Dolan.
He does have excellent taste in men. But we'll be back in touch if we hit terrible traffic, which I fear we might. But as I say, so far, so good. But we've got our fingers crossed. But I suspect, as I say, fairly soon we'll hit the brick wall. But we'll let you know.
Love to you and the missus, and you've earned that pint when you get to Cornwall. Kevin O'Sullivan there. We've got the Kev cam, the Kev tracker, and keeping an eye on his movements. He's away for 2 weeks. What are we going to do without Kevin O'Sullivan for 2 weeks? You can't. There's going to be a common sense vacuum. I fear that talk might go a bit woke if he doesn't hurry back. I think the boss needs to make a call. Listen, I've got some developing news for you here. The Home Office will seek to appeal against the High Court's refusal to allow it to intervene in a case of a hotel used to house asylum seekers in Epping. This according to Security Minister Dan Jarvis. That's right, the Home Office are going to appeal against the High Court's refusal to allow it to intervene in a case. So this is the authorities, the judiciary, the Home Office, the civil servants, the blob, who are quite demonstrably working against people power, working against the will of the people, who don't want these hotels used to accommodate asylum seekers, illegal migrants. And someone that feels very passionately about that is Sarah White. And she is a mother. She is an Epping Forest resident and a local campaigner. And she joins me now. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well, and I'm very grateful that you've joined us, because I really want to hear from folk on the ground. Can I ask you, first of all, Sarah, why you are so concerned about this issue of asylum seekers accommodated in hotels?
Well, I'm concerned about all of the hotels, but in particular, the one in Epping is so close to a secondary school. And, you know, that is a main concern for us in Epping. And as we have seen from recent events, that these men do harass young women and children, and it's totally unacceptable. They've got totally different morals to us. I've said this before, you know, they don't land on British soil and all of a sudden have the morals of somebody who has been born and bred here.
Yeah, and of course, it won't be every single one of them, will it? Obviously, they've broken the law by entering the country illegally, which I think is completely unacceptable. And I'm guessing you wouldn't say that 100% of the individuals in these hotels is some kind of predator in waiting. But enough are, and even if it's one, it would be one too many.
100%. And, you know, it'd be silly of me or anybody else to say that every single person that comes here undocumented is a criminal. However, we don't know who they are. Yeah. And they've dropped their papers. They could have booked a flight here for, say, £50 to £200, come here legally, provided their papers, and we would know who they are. And then they could claim asylum. You know, to come here and break into the country, we don't know who they are, and they purposely get rid of their papers, and that is a major concern.
Have you paid a personal price for the campaign that you've been participating in? Because we know that there are sections of the media that would have you down as far right or something, even though you're a concerned mother.
Yeah, I mean, the label far right is thrown about too easily these days. However, I'm glad to see that the left are being called out a lot more than, say, 4 or 5 years ago. And, you know, yes, we've all paid a price because we've given up our spare time to be with our families and go away. We're in Epping 2 evenings every single week. And not only that, we meet to also organise future events. you know, and that is time consuming, but we do it because we're very passionate about our community. And that is it at the end of the day. I've had people get in touch with me saying, what's your real motive? What are you really here for? I'm here because I'm a concerned mother and I'm concerned about everybody up and down the country. And that is it.
How do you feel about being given a political label?
To be honest, if people want to label me and say it's got to do with, it's political, it's nothing political at all. This is what's right and what's wrong. And I know the difference between right and wrong.
Yeah.
And that is what I have to stand up for. And I believe that everybody in this country needs to stand up for what's right. Enough is enough now. And there are too many crimes being committed by these people that are coming here illegally. And at the end of the day, it needs to be stopped.
And it's not just crimes, is it? It's low-level harassment, stares, wolf whistles, and just a feeling of vulnerability among women and children.
Yeah, 100%. You know, it's a fundamental right to feel safe in your community. The reason why we can walk the streets safely is because of development over centuries.
Yeah.
People have evolved and we are upstanding citizens. Yes, we do have crime in our country committed by our own people, but why do we have to have extra people coming here and committing crimes as well?
I completely agree with you. That's the point. And people often suggest, you know, there are sexual assaults from UK nationals. Of course there are. But if something of that nature happens from someone that's entered the country illegally, then it's an assault, a crime that could have been prevented, that it shouldn't have happened, because what we've done is imported a criminal rather than had to deal with the criminals that already are on our shores. Sarah, the Home Office are going to seek to appeal against the High Court's refusal to allow it to intervene in the case of this hotel being used, the Bell Hotel in Epping. Your reaction to that the Home Office are trying to reinstate this place as a venue for migrants?
Well, to be honest with you, we all knew that this would happen. We, the people of Epping, understood that the Home Office would 100% put in an appeal for this. They wasn't going to see this as a victory for the people of Great Britain, because basically this will create a domino effect. And we know that peaceful protests do work, and I think that the rest of the country are seeing how well we coped in Epping and that we managed to achieve this. So the Home Office are obviously scared now, because what are they going to do with all of these people that are being housed in these so-called hotels? They are no longer hotels. People are being able to stay there for free. And if the government actually cared about stopping these people coming into our country, they could, instead of having the police in their hundreds at Epping, they could send them to our shores and stop these men as soon as they land on British soil.
They should definitely do that. Sarah, before I let you go, are you worried that these peaceful and important protests that I support 110%, are you worried that they'll be hijacked by radical activists on the left and potentially the right as well?
Yeah, I know. We have seen in the first couple of protests at Epping, they was hijacked. There wasn't too much, it wasn't violent, but there was some signs of aggression. And we said that there was no place for that in Epping. And the people, and they was the left and they was Antifa, but they never came back again. And I think as long as you keep peaceful, we can achieve as a country to close all of these hotels down. But in saying that, I don't want these undocumented men then being dispersed and put into Airbnbs. We can't have that, because at the moment in hotels, we know where they are. At least they're in one venue in each community. They need to be taken to a detention centre. There needs to be a curfew in place. They can't be let out to roam the streets until we know who they are.
Common sense. Sarah, more power to you. And thank you for speaking so well and being so courageous. And, you know, I think definitively the most important conversation that we've had in the last 3 hours. Sarah White, Epping Forest resident and local campaigner. Do you disagree with Sarah's approach? Do you object to her protest? Let me know. This show is all about opinions. Get yours in 03444991000. I've got a big backlog of calls to get through. But next up, we've got to sort out our education system because I'm afraid the kids are suffering. Kids are failing English and maths at record levels. And now the government are planning to scrap obligatory resets, sparking fears that academic standards will plunge further. Is it time to bring back a traditional, strict education and ditch trendy, progressive ideas in the classroom? We'll speak to a man who suggests just that next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
The brilliant Ian Collins takes the helm at 1 o'clock. And let me see, we've got many more messages coming in. And let's have a look at this. John in Sutton says, Mark, Nigel Farage is the real deal. Boris was an establishment flunky. I'll get to more of your messages shortly because there are so many. Just this from D in Southend, which is a very nice part of the world. D says, Mark, in my opinion, Nigel Farage and Reform will be the best party to run the country purely because they really love this country and genuinely want it to be great again. The people we have at the moment seem as if they don't like us at all. Well, no, there are plenty of folks in the Labour movement who want to permanently apologise for this country, whilst I think we should celebrate it. Adrian in Wales says, Mark, Reform is very cleverly learning how to tackle the blob at local authority level before tackling the big beast. Now, the government will draw up plans to reform exams to avoid teenagers repeatedly resitting maths and English GCSEs after a national review reports this autumn. A functional skills test or a driving exam style competency assessment is being considered to replace resits for pupils who fail core subjects. Politicians and education figures are lobbying for the change, arguing that the resit system is in crisis and leaving hundreds of thousands of pupils low in confidence and without key qualifications. So the GCSE results published yesterday showed that resits jumped by 12%. That's 12% up on last year, with only 18% of retakes achieving a grade 4, equivalent to a C in maths, 23% getting a passing grade in English. So that is more than 250,000 tests that were failed. The headline story is that we don't seem to be able to teach our children basic mathematics and English. Can we fix it? Well, I know a man who I think can, and it's Chris McGovern, chairman of the Campaign for Real Education. Chris, welcome to the show. Do these numbers surprise you?
They are depressing, but they don't surprise me. Let me just give you a sense of perspective on this, Mark, and I'm sure readers, listeners will be surprised. A couple of years ago, we found out what was the pass mark. So we're talking about a GCSE pass at level 4. That's regarded as a pass. Well, a couple of years ago, we got the actual pass mark. It was 14. That's 14%. So we're now talking about a large number of children in this country who can't even score 14%. And what the government is saying, we've got to lower that maybe to 4%. This is, to be honest, Mark, a grade 4 GCSE is a certificate of incompetence, that we call it a pass. So we've got a crisis, a real crisis.
Well, definitely, with this new grading system, they're cooking the books, aren't they?
They're cooking the books. Look, what is not known, what never commented upon, you can have any grade, any pass rate you like. The exam boards set the grade levels, so that it differs from year to year. So, as I say, a couple of years ago, the pass level was 14%. It could be 12% next year. It could be 18%. They can set it where they like. So you can have any pass rate you like. No one's saying this, but the thing is full of flaws. Yes.
So how do we solve this crisis, particularly within mathematics and English?
What matters most of all, of course, is the quality of teaching. There are some schools around the country. Catherine Bebel-Singh's school in London is a good example. She's regarded as a pretty strict head teacher. Well, she had 100% pass rate. There are some schools which are getting 100%, so it is possible to do it. We are already running about 3 years behind in mathematics compared to the schools in Asia, or some of the best schools in Asia. We look at the good schools in our country and think they're doing really well, but actually the children of the street cleaners in Shanghai are outperforming the average best children in our schools. They're doing far better. So we've got a real problem here. And I said it before, if you want to see our economy in 20 years' time, look at our education system today. Well, those 20 years are going away. We've got to produce a skilled workforce. My own suggestion, Mark, would be just to scrap GCSE altogether, because we now have education which goes up to 18 rather than 16. Therefore, perhaps a test at 14 would be better. And I would put GCSEs in at 14 for those who are academically able, because the standard is already so low. And although we talk about Michael Gove, previous Education Secretary, making the exams tougher, that means nothing if you lower the pass mark. There is a case, I agree with the government, there is a case for saying, look, for some kids, we just simply want an arithmetic test, that'll do. And other kids, they want proper exams. And it depends on what your aptitude is. We have some kids who are good with their hands, nothing wrong with that. We need many skilled manual workers, and others who are more academic. So we want horses for courses rather than this straitjacket of a single national curriculum for all kids.
Why have standards in maths and English slipped so dramatically?
Well, they've slipped because the quality of teaching isn't good enough.
But is it more than that, though? Because, I mean, we've always had good and bad teachers, haven't we, Chris? Is there an issue with the syllabus or the philosophy behind their approach?
Look, when I left the state sector, a large comprehensive school, to teach in a primary school in the private sector, and I taught mathematics to 7-year-olds. Well, the standard of maths I was teaching to those 7-year-olds is what is the standard of 11-year-olds in the state sector. You know, they all knew their tables by the age of 7, for example. So, yeah, you have to raise the bar. You have to have high expectations. The point is, and it's been said elsewhere internationally, other countries, particularly in the Asia-Pacific, but elsewhere too, in Europe, in Estonia, and even in Poland, they're asking more of their kids. But you do have to have high-quality teaching. You have to set the bar quite high. And at the situation at the moment is ridiculous, where we have an exam, we're congratulating ourselves on the whole about how well our kids are doing. No, the truth is our kids are not doing well internationally, and our economy is going to suffer. We don't have a choice in this, Mark. We either raise the standard. We have to raise the quality of teacher training and the quality of people entering the profession. And I think good maths teachers should be paid more if they're good at their job. And we need perhaps to reduce the number of classroom assistants in classes. Some schools have 2 in each class. It's ridiculous. And we need to put the money into recruiting the very best teachers and training them well.
But also, hasn't progressivism infiltrated the education sector. And if you look at, you mentioned the success of Michaela's school in Wembley, Catherine Burble Singh, where she has an intake of quite often, lower socioeconomic background kids, multi-ethnic, and she's getting them into Oxford and Cambridge. And as you mentioned, no failed grades in this year's entire school for GCSE. But the approach, yes, the teaching is good, but the philosophy is different too. It's more traditional, isn't it? And stricter.
It is. It's the teacher at the front of the class, the children facing the front. But in most primary schools and many secondary schools, you'll see children sat around tables. The teacher's what they call a manager of the learning process. It doesn't work. And that's hopeless. So we do need to get back to more traditional methods. Look, we're the only country in the developed world where grandparents outperform their grandchildren in basic skills, not in computer technology, no, but in maths and English, the grandparents do better. And this is an indictment of where we are today.
And the teaching unions, they don't want testing and they don't want exams.
Well, no. I mean, look, I was a union member myself, Mark. I sat on the TUC. Yes, I'm a bit of an aberrant voice. I agree. The unions don't like testing, but when I taught in the private sector, we were having tests every week.
Yeah.
So the fact is, if we have tests once every 3 or 4 or 5 years, of course that makes kids nervous and staff nervous. Have the tests every week, and then they get used to the sort of tests when they need them. But we do need horses for courses. Some kids are not academic, some kids are. And probably in secondary school, maybe from the age of 12 or 13, they need to go along different pathways. We desperately need more skilled manual workers. We need bricklayers, we need roofers, we need plumbers, we need electricians. We desperately need. We don't need people like me, historians. We need people who can do something with that. My mum used to say to me, Mark, get a trade, Chris. That's what you need in life. I ended up as a history teacher and headmaster.
Well, listen, that is an important vocation in itself. Briefly, Chris, before we let you go, you've mentioned in the past, with examples, I think, of Vietnam and the Far East, that this is not about money. And the cost to the taxpayer of educating a secondary school pupil is, I think, in the region of £9,500 per head, which is a generous budget. It's not about money. Tell me more.
It's not about money. In fact, even this week, Professor Tooley, who runs a grammar school in the northeast, runs it on about private school, but £5,000 a year.
So that's half. So you can go to a private school in the north of England for half the cost of the taxpayer pays for a state school.
One particular school which is being run on particular lines, but you know, Vietnam, for example, which is doing very well in terms of international attainment, they spend a tiny amount of money compared to us. Maybe a fifth of or even less than what we spend. We know from the international research, what's called the OECD, the number crunchers, they say unequivocally, it is not about the money you spend. The more money you spend does not mean you get higher standard. It's about the quality of the teaching and, of course, the quality of the methods and the quality of the curriculum. It's not about money. And that's why Vietnam outperforms the UK.
Chris, I'm going to give you an A star.
Thank you.
And well deserved. Can I just tell you, I've never given a teacher a grade before, and how dare I? Chris McGovern, it was really good to see you again. Thank you for joining us. I'm very passionate about education, and I think Chris is very wise in what he's had to say there. He's the chairman of the Campaign for Real Education. Next up, your calls, is Nigel Farage the future of Britain?
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is Farage at the future? Your calls in just a moment. Alison in St Albans. Hello, Alison. Thank you for your kind words. She says, think about this. In the general election, Labour received 9.7 million votes only. The online election petition is heading towards 10% of that, with over 800,000 signatures. She wants everyone to sign that petition. Every little helps, says Alison. Paul in Great Yarmouth. Hi, Mark. When, not if, reform get in, they won't be able to change anything. Every policy they try and put forward, like immigration, net zero, and the country's infrastructure, will be blocked, taken to court, and hundreds of millions wasted on irrelevant arguments and woke fringe groups. Tax won't ever go down and living standards will marginally get better, but probably not. The country is on a downward spiral that is, I think, unrecoverable. I worry you might be right, Paul, and that's why I suspect that if there's going to be a political revolution, whoever does it, whether it's Farage or Badenoch or anyone else waiting in the wings, they need a decade. They need a big majority, and they need a decade. Mick says, Mark, Ed Davey destroyed our nuclear power and imposed tuition fees. Miliband destroyed our oil industry, and May destroyed our police. All unforgivable. Nigel, says Amanda, speaks the people's language. No double, meaningless political speak with him. He says it how it is. We will reclaim our country and smash all the woke and other nonsense. That's strong views there from Amanda. Thank you for sharing them. Dave is in Hampshire. Hello, Dave.
Hello, Mark. Welcome back to Talk Radio, Talk TV.
Thank you. Listen, it's great to be back, and I do feel very welcome. And I've missed talking about the state of the country, and it feels like everyone's in a bit of a gloom at the moment. Are you hopeful for the future?
Well, I think Reform have got the perfect opportunity if they win the Senate, the Welsh elections in May, because they'll have then set a benchmark of what they're capable of nationally. So they've really got to, perform well if they do win, and I hope they do win in Wales. And that sense will send the signal out, won't it, to say if they're actually going to be any good. If they're not any good there, then I'm concerned. And wouldn't it be great, though, if Blair's legacy of devolution actually helps Reform get into government?
Wouldn't it be ironic, Dave? Dave, I wish we had longer. What a brilliant call. Yeah, that is Dave. And I've got another Dave in Basildon. Dave, you think that there's something big's going to happen next year, Dave?
Yeah, I do. I wholeheartedly agree with your earlier caller. I don't see how they can last another 4 years. I think the national debt will get them. Banks, the international banks will refuse to keep giving us credit, and unless somebody takes the ball by the horns, and this lot certainly will not do it, they're all infighting among themselves, and about 20% of his MPs fully support Jeremy Corbyn, so he is in a state, and I've always thought from July the 5th last year that there will have to be an election September, October 26. I hope I'm right, but I don't see any option. I really don't. The state of the country, where these protests are not going away. No. They've made a martyr of Lucy Connolly. She's going to be the next Joan of Arc. That's what I believe, and they really have. They've messed everything up. They hate this country. They absolutely hate everything it stands for. And people, just the average Joe, wants to get on with his life and not be burdened with it. Where are they going to put the migrants? Well, anybody that wants them, let them have one each at their own expense and their responsibility. Find a place for them on the floor, on the sleeping bag, and let them have them. All these do-gooders, let them have one each. None of them will step forward, and until we sort this out and just round them up and deport them, it's costing billions. It's probably costing 20 or 30 billion a year with all the lefty lawyers and all the rest of the hidden costs that nobody talks about.
And of course, what happens, Dave, is that the majority of these people that enter the country illegally, what people don't realise is the majority of them, maybe 90% upwards, will be granted asylum and they will stay. And unless they're engineers or, you know, I don't know, doctors or something, that they're unlikely to be a net contributor to this country.
Well, I would just ungrant their status when reform got in, round them up, put them in tents, so where you come from, right, you don't want to tell us, we'll round you all up, put you on a warship and we'll take you over.
Dave, aren't you a bit harsh on Keir Starmer? I know he's, you know, up in Islington and all of that, but, you know, he says he loves his country, that he's a big patriot and he's very proud of his country. Are you not, you know, convinced?
No, that's another lie. Mike Graham just keeps calling him a liar. Mike Graham is absolutely 100% right. So is Kevin O'Sullivan.
Well,
he is a liar.
Well, listen, Dave, fair enough, and I appreciate your very, very passionate views. Let's take a listen to Deborah, who has strong views about Nigel and the next election.
With regards to reform, nobody knows if Nigel reform will be the answer to our plight. All this speculation is nonsense. At the end of the day, everybody, and your last caller who said the British are lazy, get out and vote if you want change or you want to see change. That's the only way it's going to be done. Vote. Put your cross where it's most wanted.
Well, listen, you cannot argue with that. Deborah is absolutely right. In the end, democracy will hopefully save us. People power will save us. And if that doesn't work, we have the titan of the airwaves, Ian Collins, to sort everything out.
Mark Dolan. How are you?
Listening very well. And what a treat having a chat with you the other day. You were far too kind.
Really?
Yeah.
That wasn't the intention.
Yeah, you were, I don't know if you were under the influence or something, but it's very nice to see you. Yeah, it probably was.
Quite possibly.
Listen, I mean, I tell you, what a full basket of topics today.
I mean, it's incredible, and I'm sure you just mentioned this, but the government now seeking to appeal the High Court refusal to allow it to intervene in the case of the Epping Hotel. Now, of course, that was a planning issue, technically. Doesn't matter, because it started a chain of events.
Correct.
This weekend, of course, 26 different protests on this. There's got to be a point, isn't there, where, I don't know, do protests ever change anything? Stop the war back in the day when Galloway and 1 million people marched through London did absolutely nothing to stop Blair's war in Iraq. Did not. Fox hunting, they remember the second largest protest we've ever had in this country was a pro-fox hunting rally against Blair's banning of field
The farmer protest has done nothing?
Indeed. But will this be more decisive? Because it's so localised and it's so tangible and it's, you know, ordinary people very much viscerally feeling a sense of something's gone terribly wrong with our society.